An empty throne is loud in a way armies never are. The old king sits in that silence after the war, hands gripping carved arms polished by years of touch, while ash drifts through the palace like tired grey snow. Once, 100 suns filled these halls with sandals slapping stone, laughter, arguments, the clatter of practice maces. Now even the wind moves carefully. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are in Hastinapura. Night has settled over the Kuru palace, warm and heavy, and the stones still hold the day's heat. Oil lamps tremble in long corridors. Somewhere far off, a temple bell sounds once, then lets the darkness gather around it. You can smell sesame oil, old sandalwood, faint incense caught in the carved screens, and the dry river scent drifting up from the Ganga. The palace is too large for grief. That is the first thing you notice. Courtyards lie open beneath the stars. Pillars rise pale in the lamp glow. Silk curtains barely stir. A servant crosses one hallway with lowered feet, careful not to let an anklet speak too loudly. Even the peacocks in the gardens have gone quiet, which in itself feels miraculous. Peacocks are not known for restraint. Neither, as you will soon discover, are princes. At the center of it all sits Dhritarashtra. Old now, broad still, blind from his first breath to his last. His face is turned slightly, listening to a world that has already taken everything from him and is still not finished. The throne beneath him is carved with lions and lotuses. Gold cools in the night air. His fingers rest on the wood, as if the kingdom can still be learned by touch. You stand near enough to hear him breathe, slowly, carefully, as if each breath must step around a memory. No conch shells now, no war drums, no sons rushing in to boast, complain, demand, flatter. No Duryodhana, fierce and restless. No Dushasana, always a little too eager. No rolling thunder of 100 young Kuru voices, tumbling through the halls like monsoon water. Only ash on the wind, and a question hanging over the throne, like incense that will not thin. How did it come to this? The answer does not begin on a battlefield. It begins in a palace full of expectations, in rooms where elders speak softly and servants hear everything, in a dynasty so burdened with vows and pride that even the lamps seem to burn under pressure. So come with me. Close your eyes if you like. Dhritarashtra spent his whole life in darkness. You only have to borrow it for a little while. Much more comfortable arrangement, really. You still get a pillow. The night loosens. Time shifts. The ash is gone from the air. Now the palace is younger. The banners are brighter. The courtyards ring with bronze vessels. Priests' chants, horse snorts. The chatter of maids carrying baskets of jasmine. Fresh cow dung wash cools the courtyard floors. Wet lotus garlands drip onto polished stone. Somewhere in the kitchens, ghee hisses. Somewhere in the royal stables, a groom is having the ancient and exhausting experience of trying to reason with a horse. You are still in Hastinapura, but now the great wound has not yet opened. The Kuru line stands tall, ancient, proud, heavy with names. Shantanu still lives in memory, like a king-shaped mountain. Bhishma moves through these halls, like a vow, wrapped in white silk and steel. Satyavati, dark-eyed and watchful, holds the center with the stillness of someone who has already crossed too many storms to be surprised by another. And yet trouble has entered the house. It always does quietly. King Vichitravirya is gone from the world too soon, leaving behind no son, no heir, no small hand to inherit the weight of this empire. His chambers have been cleansed, the lamps have burned low, the mourning rites are done, but the emptiness remains, no heir. In a palace, those two words travel faster than fire in dry reeds. You can feel them in the servant's pause at the doorway, in the extra stillness at council, in the way older women whisper near the inner chambers, bangles held still against their wrists. No heir. The throne is not an ornament. It cannot simply sit and look beautiful. It must hold someone. It must have a future. And this one, shining in the lamplight, waits like a hungry thing. Satyavati knows it. You can almost hear the thought moving behind her silence. She has seen kings rise. She has seen vows made for love and kingdoms bent around them. She has borne sons, buried sons, and now stands in a palace rich with gold and poor in descendants. The dynasty has narrowed to a single, dangerous point, so she reaches backward into an older promise. A secret son, a son born before palace walls enclosed her life, a son of the sage Parashara, a son of wild places, river mist, austerity, and terrible power. Vyasa. His name moves through the inner apartments like a draught of cold air. Not loudly, never loudly, but once spoken, it changes the temperature of the room. Messengers go out. Sandals slap stone. Orders pass from chamberlain to attendant, from attendant to guard. Lamps are replenished. Curtains are drawn. Sacred water is set out in copper vessels. The women of the house lower their eyes and say little. They know enough. In palaces, people often know enough and wish they did not. You follow the message out beyond the scented halls in your mind, beyond the city noise, beyond the riverbanks and fields, into the harsher places where sages dwell among bark garments, kusa grass, and smoke from simple fires. And then he comes, not like a prince, not like a courtier. Vyasa enters carrying the forest with him. You smell him before you see him. Wood smoke, river water, earth after heat, wildness. His hair is matted. His presence is rough as tree bark against silk. In these polished corridors, he looks like a storm cloud invited to dine off golden plates. The palace has spent years perfecting refinement. Vyasa arrives, looking like refinement's worst nightmare. Servants flatten themselves against the walls. A maid carrying a tray nearly drops it, catches it, then decides this is an excellent day to become invisible. The sage walks on. Satyavati meets him. No fuss, no wasted tears. This is not a night for softness. She tells him what the house requires. The line must continue. The widowed queens must bear sons for the dynasty. The kingdom must not be left empty. The air grows thick around the words. Even the lamps seem to lean closer. Beyond carved doorways lie the chambers of the queens, Ambika and Ambalika, young still, jeweled still, carrying grief in silence, because palaces are very good at dressing sorrow in fine cloth. Somewhere inside, women are being prepared for a duty no girl dreams of and no dynasty admits is desperate, until it is already desperate. You stand in the hallway outside those chambers now. The stone beneath your feet is cool. The oil lamps breathe gold across the walls. You can hear silk rustle, a copper vessel being set down, bangles trembling softly, the far cry of a night bird from the palace gardens. And beneath it all, the approach of footsteps, steady, unhurried, inevitable. Vyasa is coming down the corridor, and before this night is over, a blind child will begin his long road toward a throne that was always waiting in the dark. Stay here a little longer. The palace is holding its breath. But to understand the man on that empty throne, you have to go back, all the way back, to a bedchamber in Hastinapura, where a queen shut her eyes and changed everything. The corridor is still warm from lamp flame and human worry. Inside Ambika's chamber, sandalwood smoke curls in thin blue threads. Fresh flowers droop in bronze bowls. The sheets are clean. The air is not. Fear has a smell of its own, dry, metallic, like a storm that has not broken. Ambika sits waiting, jeweled and rigid, her hands cold despite the heat. She has been told what duty asks of her. She has been told the kingdom is larger than a woman's comfort. Palaces are very good at saying such things. Then Vyasa enters. He brings the forest in with him, not perfume, not polished court oils, forest, river mud, smoke, wild bark, long austerity. The scent hits before his shadow does, and Ambika flinches. She looks once. That is enough. Matted hair. Fierce ascetic power. Eyes like coals under storm cloud brows. A man, shaped by vows, not by courtly manners. He is no handsome prince in a song. He is necessity walking on bare feet. Ambika closes her eyes. She keeps them closed. All night. Outside, the palace waits. Servants whisper in corners and then stop whispering when someone important passes. Somewhere, a conch sounds for the changing watch. Somewhere a dog barks in the lower courtyards and is shushed by a sleepy guard. Above it all hangs the heavy silence of a house, trying not to think about what it has just asked of one of its queens. When dawn comes, Vyasa leaves, as he entered, without ornament. Satyavati meets him again. He tells her plainly what will come of this. The child born of Ambika will be strong, very strong, a prince of immense force. But because the mother shut her eyes in fear, the boy will enter the world without sight. That sentence lands in the palace like a dropped stone. No one says much. What is there to say? The women in the inner chambers lower their voices. Priests begin, murmuring remedies before there is anything to remedy. Nurses exchange those quick little glances that mean trouble has arrived and will be expensive. Months pass. The palace goes on being a palace. Meals are served, accounts are kept. Horses are groomed in the royal stables, their breath sweet with hay in the cool mornings. White cranes pick through the lotus ponds. The Ganga moves beyond the city walls, broad and indifferent. And inside Ambika, the future grows. You can almost feel the waiting in the stone itself. Every hallway seems to ask the same question. Will the child be whole? When the labor comes, it comes hard. Night again, always night for these things. The birth chamber is thick with heat and oil smoke. Midwives move quickly. Cloths are soaked and wrung out. Brass bowls ring softly as they are set down. A priest outside mutters blessings too fast, as if speed might improve the outcome. Then, at last, the child arrives. A cry splits the room. Sharp, furious, alive. For one instant, everyone exhales. A son, a prince, a future. Then the cry goes on, and someone leans close. Too close. The air changes. It is not loud, that moment of knowing. It is almost terribly quiet. A rustle, a caught breath. The little pause before bad news learns how to wear language. The baby's eyes are open, but they do not follow light. A lamp is moved near his face. Nothing. A finger passes before him. Nothing. The nurse tries again, then again, like persistence might persuade the gods to revise themselves. Nothing. You can feel it in the room before anyone dares speak it. Not dead, not weak, not broken in body, but blind. Ambika turns her face away. Satyavati stands very still. The child keeps crying, outraged at the whole arrangement, which is honestly fair. If you're born into a dynasty with this many problems, outrage is a respectable first response. They name him Dhritarashtra. The name is heavy, royal, made for a ruler. The irony arrives later. At first, he is simply a child, warm, hungry, loud, strong in the grip even as an infant. Nurses learn quickly not to place a finger too carelessly in his hand because he closes on it like a tiny iron clamp. He sleeps badly. He eats well. He knows his mother by scent before he knows anyone by touch. Milk, jasmine, fear. That last one never quite leaves. You are there in those early years, in the women's apartments where the stone floors stay cool, even in the afternoon heat. You hear anklets and soft songs and the slap of wet cloth against polished skin during baths. You smell sesame oil, warmed ghee, crushed herbs, old wood chests, lotus paste. And the baby prince learns the world without light. He turns his face towards sound. He knows the difference between one maid's laugh and another's footstep. He can find the edge of a blanket by touch. He presses his small palm against carved pillars and traces the grooves with solemn concentration, as if the whole palace has turned into a script only his fingers can read. At first, the adults speak around him as though blindness were a curtain he cannot hear through. Poor child, unfortunate child, powerful child, yes, but what use? They say these things in softened voices. Palace pity is always soft, soft as silk, soft as butter, soft as a knife sliding in cleanly. He grows. He learns the nursery by counting steps. 7 from his sleeping mat to the low cedar chest. 4 more to the screened window where afternoon wind smells faintly of river water and dust. 3 to the nurse's stool. 2 to disappointment. That last distance, he does not count at first. He simply walks into it often enough to know where it lives. Other children begin to notice differences slowly, then all at once. There are games with painted balls. Dhritarashtra cannot follow them. There are bright parrots brought from the market, green as fresh neem leaves. Everyone gasps at their colors. Dhritarashtra reaches out to feel feathers and asks what green means. And suddenly, an entire room of adults becomes deeply interested in the floor. No one has a good answer. How do you explain color to someone born in darkness? They try flowers, cool petals in his palm, fragrance. They say red is hot like hibiscus in the sun. White is cool like moonlight on marble. Blue is like river depth at evening. Useful? Not especially. Beautiful? Perhaps. Enough? Never. You feel for him then, because children know when people are trying to patch a hole in the world with words. He learns something more useful than color. He learns tone. A servant speaking to Pandu uses one voice. To him, another. A fraction slower, a little sweeter. The kind of sweetness that tastes like pity if you leave it on the tongue too long. He hates that voice before he has words for hatred. Pandu is younger, pale from birth, fair-limbed, quicker with laughter. If Dhritarashtra moves through rooms like a storm, feeling for walls, Pandu moves like sunlight through courtyards. Horses calm under his hand. Teachers speak of his aim, his seat in a chariot, the way he can judge distance with a glance. That last part matters. With a glance. You can imagine how those words fall. The brothers are not enemies as children, not yet. Childhood is kinder than politics for a little while. They wrestle in the practice yards. They eat sweet cakes stolen from kitchen trays. They listen to old tales under punkah fans, while summer heat presses against the lattice screens. Dhritarashtra loves the sound of Pandu running. You can tell affection by what a child recognizes fastest. Dhritarashtra can pick out his younger brother's footsteps from half a courtyard away. He knows the rhythm, light, quick, never cautious. Pandu, for his part, does not speak to Dhritarashtra in that softened pity voice. He describes things plainly because someone has to. The sunset over the western towers. The peacocks opening their tails in the rain. The new banners in the assembly hall, dyed deep crimson and gold. He tells him these things not like a lecturer, but like a brother sprawled beside him after lessons, sweaty and cheerful, chewing sugarcane and talking too fast. Sometimes Dhritarashtra listens with hunger so sharp it could split stone. Sometimes with gratitude, sometimes with both. Morning lessons begin early. The palace schoolrooms smell of ink, palm leaves, oiled wood, and dust warmed by sun. Tutors arrive with precise beards and tired eyes. Princes are expected to learn histories, laws, lineages, statecraft, and the proper bearing of men who may one day order armies across the earth. Dhritarashtra learns everything by ear and remembers. That is the first thing that impresses them. Recite a genealogy once, and he can repeat it backward. Read out a treaty, and he can catch the clause a scribe skipped. He stores voices, words, pauses, hesitations. The world enters him through the ears and remains there. But learning in a palace is never only about knowledge. It is also display. A prince must ride. A prince must hunt. A prince must read faces across a hall. A prince must know when a general is lying and when a neighboring king is smiling too much. For every skill Dhritarashtra masters, another is placed just out of reach and pointed at meaningfully. Not impossible, perhaps, but inconvenient. And dynasties dislike inconvenience the way noblemen dislike sweating through silk. So he trains his body. If the eyes will not serve him, let the limbs become thunder. In the wrestling grounds, red dust clings to skin and the morning air smells of sweat, clay, and neem oil. Trainers shout, boys grunt and tumble and boast. Dhritarashtra listens to breath and footfall. He learns to feel motion through the ground before bodies touch. Soon, he is frightening, not cruel, just immense. His shoulders broaden early. His grip hardens into legend. Older boys discover, to their alarm, that a blind prince who cannot see your feint also cannot be fooled by your face. He catches wrists. He lifts opponents clean off the ground. Once, in practice, he hugs a padded post to test himself and cracks the wooden frame beneath the wrappings. After that, everyone becomes very respectful of his hugs. You stand by the practice yard and hear the thud of bodies on packed earth, the call of kites circling above, the clink of arm rings, the hiss of someone breathing through clenched teeth after being thrown by the blind prince, who was supposed to be delicate. He is never delicate. He learns mace work by weight and rhythm. He learns sword forms by count. He learns the shape of the bow, though he cannot use it as archers do. His tutors adapt, then tire of adapting. Then praise him extravagantly for effort when what he wants is not praise. He wants the one thing they will not say aloud. Enough. He is enough. That never comes. Instead, There are stories whispered first by servants, then by visiting nobles, then by the palace itself. Yes, the elder prince is mighty. Yes, his memory is astonishing. Yes, his arms are like the trunks of sal trees. But, always but. But he cannot see omens. But he cannot lead a charge. But what if enemies notice? But what if the people doubt? But what if the throne itself requires eyes? You know that feeling, don't you? When a room has decided something about you before you enter it. Dhritarashtra learns to hear decisions before they are spoken. A pause between two ministers. Bhishma's breath taken in, held, released. Satyavati's bracelets stilled in thought. The old ones do not gossip carelessly around him anymore. They know he hears too much. Still, children overhear, and princes remember. Bhishma is the mountain in those years, tall, calm, terrible in self-command. His armor smells of leather and metal and clean oil. His voice can soothe a hall or freeze it. To the boys, he is grandfather, guardian, discipline made human. When he places a hand on a shoulder, the touch is light. The expectation beneath it is not. Dhritarashtra yearns for his approval, the way dry earth yearns for monsoon. Bhishma gives him instruction, honor, care, never certainty. There is always that restraint, that tiny measured distance, as if Bhishma loves him and is already bracing for what love will have to deny. Years gather. The princes become young men. Pandu grows into the kind of beauty courts enjoy discussing. Archers frame, riders confidence, a face people turn toward. He returns from hunts smelling of horse, leather, forest leaves, sun. Servants brighten when he passes. Courtiers note how he sits straight in council and speaks decisively. Dhritarashtra notices all of this without seeing any of it. That is its own cruelty. He hears horses stamping in the outer yards and knows Pandu is mounting to ride where he cannot follow. He hears teachers praising a shot, a throw, a glance. He hears the admiration in rooms changing direction, not leaving him entirely, just angling away. Vidura grows beside them too, the third brother, sharp-minded and self-contained. Born of a maid, he will not wear a crown. That gives him a freedom the others do not have. He speaks more plainly, walks more quietly. His words settle where they are placed. With Vidura, Dhritarashtra can sometimes rest. No pity, no bright forced cheerfulness, only clarity. When the three brothers sit together in the evening, with lamps burning low, and the night air carrying champa blossoms from the gardens, there are moments when the future has not yet split them. They share fruit, laugh at tutors, complain about ceremonial meals that go on forever. Some prince from some neighboring state has preened for an hour about his horse lineage. Another has worn enough perfume to stun a mule. Court life provides endless material. For a while, brotherhood is real. For a while. Then the question no one can postpone settles over Hastinapura. Who will rule? The old succession crisis has not gone away. It has simply matured, like bad milk in a sealed jar. Dhritarashtra is firstborn. Dhritarashtra is strong. Dhritarashtra is learned. Dhritarashtra is blind. Pandu is younger. Pandu can see. In a kinder world, perhaps the discussion would have been long, inventive, sincere. Advisors might have built ways around one man's blindness, strength joined to counsel, rule shared with trust. This is not that world. This is a palace. And palaces like clean answers, even when they stain everything. The day comes hot and windless. You're in the assembly hall before the announcement, and the whole place feels over-polished, over-prepared. Water has been sprinkled on the stone floors to settle the dust. Garlands hang fresh on pillars. The smell of sandalwood paste and lamp ghee lies thick in the air. Somewhere outside, a peacock keeps crying as if it objects to royal procedure on principle. Good instincts, that bird. Courtiers gather in layered silks. Gold ornaments click softly when men shift their weight. Priests murmur. Scribes wait with sharpened reeds. You can hear people trying to breathe normally. Dhritarashtra is led to his place. He knows this hall well. The exact number of steps from entrance to central dais. The grain of the carved armrest. The faint draft from the western screens. The place where sound echoes differently because the ceiling rises into a dome painted with scenes he has never seen and can probably describe better than half the nobles present. Pandu stands somewhere nearby, Vidura too. Bhishma is ahead. When Bhishma begins, his voice fills the hall like a great bell. He speaks of lineage, duty, the good of the kingdom, the burden of rule. No one fidgets now. Dhritarashtra listens so hard, it is almost painful. You can feel it in your own chest, that terrible concentration, as if listening itself might alter destiny if done with enough force. Then it comes, not shouted, not cruelly, almost gently. That is what makes it worse. For the welfare of the realm, for the stability of the throne, Pandu will rule. The words hang in the scented air. No thunder, no omen, just a decision. Across the hall, someone lets out a breath they were pretending not to hold. Dhritarashtra does not move. That is the first victory. Stillness. Inside him, though, everything drops. You know that sensation when your stomach falls away and the world keeps speaking as if nothing has happened. That, exactly that. A long interior plunge while sandalwood burns and bracelets chime and men nod solemnly about necessity. He hears the formal phrases continue. Honor will still be his. Respect will still be his. He will remain beloved, esteemed, central to the house. These are the garlands they place on. Refusals. Beloved, but not chosen. Respected, but not trusted. Strong, but not fit. He inclines his head. Because what else can he do in that room? Overturn the dais? Wrestle the kingdom to the floor? Even he knows a throne cannot be won by breaking furniture. Though for one hot instant, that probably sounds deeply satisfying. Pandu is crowned. The conches blow. Flowers are scattered. Voices rise in praise. And Dhritarashtra sits inside the noise like a man shut behind a wall. You are there with him. You hear the roar of approval rolling up into the rafters. You smell marigold and oil and hot human bodies pressed too close. You feel the smooth wood under his hand where his fingers grip once, hard enough to leave marks no one will mention. Bhishma has spoken. The kingdom has agreed. The world, which had been deciding this quietly for years, has finally said it aloud. Afterward, people approach him carefully. Too carefully. Offerings of consolation, dressed as compliments. They tell him his wisdom will guide the throne, that Pandu will rely on him, that brothers united are stronger than brothers divided. All true, perhaps, all ash in the mouth. Pandu comes to him too. Pandu, who likely means every word of affection he offers. Pandu, whose joy is already shadowed by guilt. Pandu, who did not steal the crown with malice. He merely stood where light fell naturally, and the world preferred what it could see. Dhritarashtra receives him. What passes between them is not simple. It will never again be simple. Love remains. So does injury. That is the real beginning. Not the blindness at birth, not the whispers in corridors. This, the moment a man learns that being worthy and being chosen are not the same thing. That night, the palace quiets slowly. Festive sounds drift away, chamber by chamber. Drums fade, courtyards empty. Even the horses settle in their stalls, snorting softly into straw. Moonlight touches the marble terraces where Dhritarashtra will never walk by sight. In his chamber, lamps burn low. The air smells of cooling oil, cotton cloth, faint incense, and the dust of flower petals crushed under too many ceremonial feet. He sits awake. No attendants now, no comforting lies, only the hush of a great house sleeping after it has made up its mind. He reaches for the carved edge of a table he has known since boyhood, finds it instantly. Of course he does. He knows this room better than anyone alive. He knows where the chest sits, where the rug begins, where the night breeze slips through the lattice after midnight, carrying river damp and the far croaking of frogs from the lower ponds. He knows everything, everything, except how to stop the one thing that has happened. And there, in the dark that has always been his, something settles. Not a vow, not yet, not open rage, something quieter, heavier, a hurt that folds in on itself and waits. The feeling that the world has looked at him once, judged him forever, and moved on. Outside, Hastinapura sleeps under stars. Inside, the blind prince does not sleep. He sits very still, listening to a kingdom breathe around him. And in that breathing, in that long, warm dark, the first root of the future takes hold. And then the world shifts. A messenger arrives at the palace gates, dust on his clothes, grief on his face. Pandu is dead. You can feel the change before the news is spoken aloud. The palace servants move differently. Sandals slap stone a little too fast. Bangles stop chiming in one corridor and begin whispering in another. Somewhere, a copper tray is set down too hard, and the ringing note hangs in the air. Dhritarashtra hears it all. He hears the pause before a name. He hears men swallow. He hears pity trying to dress itself up as protocol. The messenger is brought in with the smell of hot road dust still on him, horse sweat, old leather, and the sharp green scent of crushed leaves caught in his hem from forest travel. His voice is hoarse. He has spoken too much on the road and wishes, probably, that he had stopped one village earlier and become a potter. But no, he has arrived here to bring a kingdom its grief. Pandu, the younger brother who had taken the throne and gone away into the forest, is gone. The end came there among trees and wind and mountain silence. Madri, his second wife, has gone with him into the fire. Kunti lives. The boys live. The boys, 5 of them, 5 sons of Pandu, walking back toward Hastinapura. And now, at last, the throne turns in Dhritarashtra's direction. Not as a gift, not with trumpets, like a bowl placed in his hands while it is still burning. He sits very still while the words land. Pandu is dead. The kingdom needs a ruler. The blind elder brother, passed over once, will now govern. But not cleanly, never cleanly. Not king in the full, easy sense. Guardian, regent, keeper, the man holding the house together for heirs who are not his own. The throne has finally fallen into his lap, and it comes with 5 boys attached to it like iron chains wrapped in silk. The chamber smells of lamp smoke and sandalwood. A fly circles near a bowl of fruit, then blunders against a bronze dish with a tiny tap. Outside, someone begins to weep, properly now that the formal message is delivered. Dhritarashtra lowers his head. If there is satisfaction in him, it is buried under too much else to name. Grief for a brother, old bitterness, relief so shameful it scarcely dares breathe. And beneath it all, something that feels like fate, playing a joke with very dry lips. You wanted the throne. Fine. Take it now. Take it after your brother is ash. Take it with his sons climbing the palace steps. Take it while everyone remembers that it should have been his line, not yours. That is how it comes. That is how so many things come in Hastinapura. Not pure, never pure. The days that follow smell of ritual. Wet clay from newly plastered courtyards. Ghee poured into sacred fire. Smoke from funeral offerings, wilted marigolds. Curd, sesame, kusa grass. Priests with dry throats chanting long into the afternoon heat. Word moves down the Ganga like birds lifting from reeds. Pandu has passed, the sun's return. The court gathers itself into solemn order. Bhishma stands like an old pillar that somehow still bears the whole roof. Vidura moves quietly, speaking little, missing nothing. Satyavati, older now, carries silence like a second garment. And then Kunti comes home. You are there in the long entrance hall when the returning party arrives. You can almost feel the road clinging to them. The smell of bark cloth, dried sweat, river mud, sun-warmed wool, smoke from campfires. Forest life walks into a palace and does not apologize. First come attendants, then the rustle of women's garments, then the light, uncertain footsteps of children who have not grown up on polished floors. And then Kunti, widow now, voice steadier than anyone expects. She bows where she must. She names what has happened. She gives the boys over to the house of the Kurus, because where else can she go? Dhritarashtra receives them. One by one, they are brought near enough for him to know them by sound, scent, and the shape of their breathing. Yudhishthira first. Even as a child, he stands like he is trying not to take up more space than duty allows. His voice is measured, no fidgeting, no unnecessary noise. He smells faintly of dust and clarified butter from the rites, and of the outdoors, clean and dry. Bhima is next. Bhima does not enter rooms. He arrives in them. You can hear the weight in his step, even while he is still young. His breath is fuller, more impatient. He shifts his feet. Cloth strains where ordinary cloth should not be straining on a child. Somewhere in the line, a servant nearly loses grip on a tray because this boy brushes past like a small bull calf who has not yet learned that hallways are narrower than fields. Arjuna comes with quickness. You hear alertness in him. That sounds strange, but it is true. Some children drag the air after them. Arjuna cuts through it. His movements are neat, precise, restless in a contained way, like a bowstring waiting to understand itself. Then Nakula and Sahadeva. The twins carry mountain sweetness still, herbs, fresh water, the faint smell of horse and wild grass that clings to children reared near open land. Their steps are lighter. Their voices when they speak are beautiful enough to annoy older cousins later. For now, they are simply small, solemn, and newly fatherless. Dhritarashtra reaches out, little shoulders, warm heads, hands placed in his own. This is the strangest part. He does love them. Not as his own sons, not in that fierce, blind, almost animal way that will come later. But he loves them as the children of his house, his dead brother's boys, little branches from the same old trunk. And that love makes everything worse, because love mixed with resentment is heavy work. It does not sit quietly. it mutters. The palace changes to fit them. Tutors are summoned, nurses assigned, sleeping chambers rearranged, kitchens expanded because children eat as if they are trying to negotiate with the future through rice alone. Courtyards ring with new footsteps. Practice yards begin to fill with shouted games, wooden weapons, bruised knees, and conspiracies of the harmless kind. For a while, it almost feels possible. Almost. But before all that truly settles, there is Gandhari. You have heard of her already, of course. Princess of Gandhara, wife chosen for the blind prince, a woman born far from the Ganga plains, from sharper hills and colder winds. When she first came to Hastinapura, she made a choice that stunned the whole palace. She bound cloth over her own eyes, not for a day, not for a ceremony, for life. To share her husband's darkness, they said, to refuse a privilege he had been denied, to make his condition hers. Noble, yes, also inconvenient in ways no bard sings first, because daily life is mostly inconvenience. The grand gesture is one moment. Then come the stairs, the thresholds, the spilled water, the misplaced needle, the tray left half a hand too far to the left, the lamp that cannot be admired, the child's face that cannot be watched, the husband's expression that cannot be read. That is where marriage lives, not in vows. In the half-lit, ordinary awkwardness after them. Dhritarashtra comes to know Gandhari by sound as much as by touch. The low, steady music of her bangles, the particular whisper of fine Gandhara cloth, a little heavier than the silks of the plains. The scent she favors, sometimes saffron and lotus, sometimes just clean cotton and the smoke from morning prayer. The calm in her voice. That calm is not softness. Do not confuse the two. Gandhari can be tender. Yes, she can also make men feel foolish with 3 quiet sentences and 1 silence. In private, she learns the world of his darkness not as poetry, but as discipline. She counts steps. She memorizes wall corners. She lets servants guide her only when she must. At first she reaches wrong, misjudges distance, bumps her shin against carved furniture, and once, memorably, sits down with perfect queenly dignity onto a low stool that was not where she thought it was. The stool tipped. So did the queen. No one laughed aloud. No one wished to stop living that day. But Dhritarashtra, hearing the muffled scramble of attendants and Gandhari herself exhaling through her nose in furious restraint, nearly did laugh. Nearly. A dangerous precious almost. Their marriage grows in sounds like that. Not always romantic, real. Sometimes in the night, they talk when the palace has gone quiet and the heat has finally loosened its grip on the walls. They speak of brothers, of duty, of the odd cruelty of being important and still not free. Sometimes they sit with no words at all, listening to oil lamps crackle and the river breeze move through the lattice. Sometimes she is the only person in the kingdom who does not pity him. That matters more than anyone says. Then comes her long pregnancy. Too long, much too long. Months pass, then more. The palace begins to hum with unease. Even stone walls seem to collect gossip in their cracks and breathe it back out after sunset. Women speak in lowered voices. Priests are called. Offerings are made. Herbs are boiled. Charms tied. Auspicious verses recited until they no longer sound auspicious, only tired, and still no child. Meanwhile, news comes from the forest. Kunti has sons. One, then another, then another. Gandhari hears of it all. So does Dhritarashtra. You can feel the sting of each report. A son born to Pandu. Another another. The line that was supposed to be paused out there in the wilderness is not paused at all. It is multiplying. Inside Gandhari's chamber, the air smells of medicinal paste, warm milk, sandal, anxious sweat. The cloth around her eyes is fresh, but her patience is fraying. Dhritarashtra sits with her through stretches of silence so long they begin to feel like weather. Then, in bitterness and anguish, she strikes her own womb. The thing that comes from her is no healthy child, not even close, a hard, lifeless mass. The women attending her gasp. One drops a brass bowl. It rolls in a widening circle on the floor, humming against stone like a trapped insect. For a moment, the whole palace seems to stop breathing. Then Vyasa is summoned. Of course he is. Whenever the Kuru house reaches the edge of the impossible, some old sage with matted hair appears, smelling of bark and river water, as if he had been waiting just beyond the walls. He comes smelling of forest, smoke, old bark, and monsoon earth. His voice enters before he does, deep and rough as a riverbank after rain. He does not fuss. He does not panic. He gives instructions. The strange mass is divided, not into 2, not into 10, into 100 pieces, and one more, each placed into separate jars filled with ghee. Imagine that room, rows of vessels, thick, rich, smell of clarified butter warm in the air, priests murmuring, women moving carefully as if carrying sleep itself. 100 futures, sealed in clay and fat and hope. If you were standing there, you would not know whether to bow or back away slowly. The jars are kept, waited on, guarded. Time passes, and then, one by one, the children come, not from the body now, but from those uncanny vessels. The palace nursery fills like a floodplain in monsoon. Nurses everywhere, tiny cries from every corner, soft cotton, oil, milk, cumin smoke, warm skin, and the constant urgent work of keeping 100 royal infants alive, 100 sons, and a daughter too, later, Dushala, precious among them. If one baby can rule a household, then 100 can conquer a province. The sound alone is astonishing. At dawn, before the sun has fully struck the high balconies, the nursery roars like a flock of demanding parrots. Somewhere, someone is always hungry. Somewhere, someone has escaped a rapping. Somewhere, a nurse is pleading with the gods and with a child who has no interest in theology and wants only milk immediately. Congratulations, Astinapura. You have your heirs. You also have no peace ever again. The firstborn is Duryodhana. And when he comes into the world, the night is wrong. Jackals howl, dogs answer, birds startle out of trees at hours when birds should be sensible and asleep. Winds move hot and sour through the courtyards. Donkeys cry, fires flicker oddly. The horses in their stalls stamp and snort. The palace hears it all. So does Dhritarashtra. He takes the child in his arms. For the first time, his son, his first son. Warm, real, breathing. The infant's skin is soft as flower petals. His fists open and close with tiny, furious determination. He makes that snuffling newborn sound as he searches blindly for comfort. And into that intimate little circle of father, mother, child, the warning arrives. Vidura says what others hesitate to say. He says the omens are terrible. He says this child will bring ruin. He says that for the sake of the family, for the sake of the kingdom, one life should be relinquished before it destroys many. Bhishma, grave as winter, does not dismiss the fear. Others murmur. Priests shift. No one wants to be the man who recommends setting aside a newborn prince. No one wants to be the fool who ignores the heavens either. Dhritarashtra holds his son tighter. You are with him in that moment. You can feel it. The baby's breath against his wrist, the tiny weight against his chest, the smell of milk and sesame oil and new cloth, and around him, men speaking of duty, sacrifice, necessity. Easy words, very easy when the child is not in your arms. Dhritarashtra refuses. Of course he refuses. He says what any father would say, what many fathers should not say when kingship is involved. This is his son, his firstborn, the heir of his body, after years of waiting, years of being, measured, denied, pitied, passed over. He will not abandon him because jackals made noise in the dark. Maybe he says it more nobly than that. Maybe he wraps it in destiny and hope and paternal right. But underneath it is simple. Mine. He chooses the child. And for the first time, he hears a warning clearly and turns his face from it, not with cruelty. That is the dangerous part, with love. The palace raises both broods together. The 5 sons of Pandu, the 100 sons of Dhritarashtra. A field of cousins growing side by side under one roof, while every older person with sense quietly develops stomach trouble. At first, they are just boys. They race through corridors that smell of wet stone in monsoon season and dust in summer. They wrestle in the courtyards where neem shade trembles over packed earth. They splash in the palace pools. They steal sweets from kitchens dense with the smell of cardamom, frying ghee, jaggery syrup, and smoke. They learn letters, lineages, and the proper order in which to salute elders. Dhritarashtra knows them not by sight, but by motion. Yudhishthira's careful tread, Bhima's unstoppable approach, usually followed by somebody else complaining, Arjuna's quick, balanced step, Duryodhana's stride already charged with purpose, a prince trying to sound older than his bones, Dushasana close behind him like an echo with worse judgment, the twins easy and graceful. 100 boys make a kingdom loud. You hear practice staffs cracking together in the training ground, boys panting, teachers shouting corrections, anklets on servants running with water jars, the metallic tang of weapons oil in the heat, dust rising from the arena and settling on lips and lashes and the hems of fine garments. The old men talk about lineage and discipline. The boys mostly want to win. And right there, in games, appetite reveals itself. Bhima is too strong. That becomes clear early. Too strong for childhood, fairness. Too hungry for kitchen planning. Too direct for polite company. He eats as if every meal personally insulted him by ending. He tackles cousins with the cheerful confidence of someone who has not yet learned that most people cannot survive being hugged at full speed. Duryodhana hates this almost immediately. He hates the laughter when Bhima sends boys tumbling. He hates the way Bhima's strength feels natural, not performed. He hates the Pandavas' place in the household, their claim, their easy bond with elders who should, in his mind, belong first to him. Hatred in children rarely arrives dressed in grand language. It starts with smaller things. That was mine. Why him? Why do they praise him? Why not me? The palace hears those questions before anyone speaks them aloud. You can tell by the silences after play, by the complaints brought to mothers, by the different ways servants report broken toys, depending on which prince broke them. Dhritarashtra knows there is friction. Of course he knows. He hears Duryodhana's breathing after losses. He hears the strain in Gandhari's voice when she asks what happened this time. He hears Kunti's careful restraint. He hears Vidura, always Vidura, speaking gently and landing every word exactly where it hurts. Then comes the first true ugliness: poison in Bhima's food. No one announces it at court like a herald reading festival dates. Such things arrive wrapped in confusion. Bhima missing, panic spreading. Then stories: a river, a fall, serpents, survival, the impossible fact that the boy returns alive and angrier and somehow even stronger. The palace swirls with whispers. Duryodhana knows more than he should. Shakuni, their maternal uncle from Gandhara, begins to spend more time in the inner apartments. Ah, Shakuni, you hear him before you trust him. Dry little laugh, dice clicking in his hand, even when no game has been called, silk that rustles too softly, as if trying not to be caught entering bad ideas into good houses. He is one of those men who always sounds amused, which is delightful until you realize the amusement is usually about other people's future disasters. He loves Duryodhana in the way certain uncles do, by feeding every grievance until it grows tusks. Warnings come, Vidura again, sometimes Bhishma, even Gandhari, who understands her son's temper better than anyone. Dhritarashtra listens. He agrees in principle. He sighs. He says boys will quarrel. He says brothers and cousins must learn together. He says time will smooth things. Time, meanwhile, is in the corner sharpening knives. Years pass. The princes are trained by Kripa first, then by Drona. The training grounds ring with bowstrings, sword practice, the thud of maces against posts, the whip of chariots turning too fast in dust. Sweat, leather, sun-baked earth, horse breath, bruised reeds, by the river where they cool themselves. Afterward, Arjuna begins to shine. Bhima grows broader, Yudhishthira steadier, and Duryodhana, fierce, proud, gifted with the mace, impossible to ignore, hardens around his envy until it begins to look like destiny. Then the realm must decide where the line truly runs. Yudhishthira, eldest son of Pandu, is declared heir apparent. The hall that day is cool with stone and shadow, though outside the sun burns white on the courtyards. Perfume from garlands mixes with the smell of men in armor and polished wood. Conch shells sound, priests invoke blessings. Dhritarashtra presides. He places the future publicly where law and custom demand it, not on Duryodhana, on Yudhishthira. He does the right thing and hates it. That is one of the quiet torments of his life. He often knows the right thing. He is not a fool. He is not ignorant. He is torn. Evil does not always arrive hot and obvious. Sometimes it is a man on a throne doing the proper thing with a shaking hand and then spending the next 10 years resenting the fact that propriety had the nerve to exist. Duryodhana does not take it well. Understatement of the century. He fumes, he plots, he leans harder into Shakuni's company. Karna joins him later, bright and wounded and loyal, in all the most dangerous ways. But already the path is under his feet. Then comes the lacquer house. A festival is suggested at Varanavata, a pleasant excursion, a lovely residence prepared there. Too lovely, perhaps, built of lacquer and oils and all the things fire loves best. Vidura smells the danger almost before the walls are dry. So do others, if they are honest. But honesty is expensive in courts. It costs invitations. Dhritarashtra hears the proposal. He knows enough, not every detail. Perhaps not even the full design at first, but enough to feel the old flinch under his ribs. This is wrong. This is his son's ambition, moving from wrestling yard malice into something darker. He could stop it. A word from him, just one. Instead, he lets the plan move forward under the cover of royal arrangement. He tells himself he may be mistaken. The house may be merely festive. Duryodhana may cool. Nothing may happen. Ah, perhaps the softest pillow in Hastinapura. So many men sleep on it. The Pandavas go. The palace waits. Then one night, the news arrives like smoke. The lacquer house has burned. Burned fast. Burned hot. Burned so completely that all inside are thought lost. The city erupts in grief. Women cry out in the corridors. Priests are summoned. Men strike their foreheads. Bhishma's sorrow falls like a door bar dropped into place. Gandhari grieves in stunned stillness. And Dhritarashtra mourns. He does. His tears are real. That is the miserable truth. Even now, even after allowing danger to gather around his brother's sons, he grieves them. He had loved them. He had failed them. These things live comfortably together in human hearts, to our shame. Yet, somewhere beneath the grief, hidden even from himself, lies the other knowledge. Duryodhana is now safer. The path is clearer. The obstacle has become ash. He hates himself for any part of him that feels the relief. But hate is not repentance. Not yet. Then, as always in this family, the dead refuse to remain conveniently dead. Word comes in time. The Pandavas live. They escaped. They have moved through danger and disguise and emerged again. They have won Draupadi of Panchala. They return not as hunted boys, but as princes with powerful allies, with fire-born dignity at their side. The palace shifts once more. Back they come. Back come the claims, the balances, the old problems everyone tried to bury under cinders. Dhritarashtra receives them warmly. Too warmly, some might think. He gives them welcome, partition, territory. Indraprastha rises. For a while, peace is arranged like flowers in a vase. Beautiful, temporary, requiring constant replacement. But Duryodhana cannot bear their prosperity. When he returns from visiting their dazzling hall, smarting from his own embarrassments there, the whispers begin to turn toward dice. You hear it first in private rooms. Shakuni's knuckles clicking against carved cubes. Duryodhana's breath sharpened by humiliation. The word game spoken in tones that have nothing playful in them. Dhritarashtra is older now. The palace is older. Heat gathers in the afternoons and sits heavy on the carved beams. Peacocks cry in the gardens. Flies drift lazily over fruit trays. Age should have made everyone wiser. It has mostly made them more practiced. Vidura warns him. Again. Always Vidura, patient as an old well. He says envy is moving toward disaster. He says dice in Shakuni's hands are not sport, but a knife with polished edges. He says no good will come of calling Yudhishthira to such a match. Dhritarashtra flinches because he knows, because every warning strikes some hidden gong inside him that has been ringing for years. The sound is familiar now. Do not do this. Stop your son. Speak. Choose. And each time he settles back. The cushion beneath him is comfortable. The thrown arms smooth under his hands. The room smells of aloe wood and old authority. Outside, a fountain chatters in the courtyard as if nothing in the world has ever gone wrong. He tells himself he only wants harmony. He tells himself denying Duryodhana will provoke worse unrest. He tells himself things can still be managed. Managed. Another lovely word, almost as good as perhaps. The invitation is allowed. The dice will fall later. For now, the choice has already begun. You are there in the hush before disaster, and the strangest thing is how ordinary it feels. A father seated in a cool chamber, a counselor offering difficult truth, a son in another room, feeding his grievance like a sacred fire. The smell of incense, the soft tread of servants. the river breathing beyond the palace walls. No thunderbolt, no cracking sky. Just one more moment when a man could stop what is coming and does not. And in the stillness after Vidura leaves, Dhritarashtra sits alone with the sound he has spent a lifetime learning not to obey. His own conscience. Outside, evening gathers over Hastinapura. Cows are led home through dusty lanes. Temple bells ring by the river. In the women's quarters, Gandhari's bangles move once, softly, as she turns her head toward a future she cannot see, and perhaps already fears. And in some shadowed room, Shakuni lets the dice roll across wood. Small sound, almost nothing, unless you know what follows. Years pass, the Pandavas return from exile, and now you come to the afternoon that broke the world. The assembly hall is cool at first. That is the first surprise. Outside, Hastinapura bakes under a white sun. Courtyards shimmer. Horses stamp in their traces. Dust lies over the roads like flour. But inside the great sabha, sandalwood pillars breathe out a sweet, dry fragrance, and the stone floor keeps a little memory of morning. You can almost pretend this is an ordinary royal gathering. Almost. Servants move quietly along the edges with fly whisks and trays of water. Silk rustles, bracelets click. Men clear their throats with that careful, important softness only courtiers possess, as if even coughing should sound political. Somewhere high above, pigeons mutter in the rafters. And on the throne sits Dhritarashtra. His hands rest on carved wood, worn smooth by years of touch. He cannot see the hall, but he knows it better than most who walk it with open eyes. He knows how sound changes under the high ceiling. He knows where Bhishma stands by the way silence arranges itself around him. He knows Vidura by the spare, plain tread. He knows Shakuni by the dry little music of dice clicking together in one hand. That sound again, small bone cubes knocking against each other, cheerful, innocent, almost playful. The sound of a cobra wearing ankle bells. Duryodhana has arranged everything beautifully. The invitation was sent with courtesy. The welcome was proper. The elders are present. The hall is full. No swords are drawn. No war drums beat. There is only a game. A game. That lovely word men use when they want ruin to wear perfume. You can feel the tension before anything begins. It hangs in the air thick as monsoon heat. Yudhishthira has come because he was summoned, because kings do not refuse such calls lightly, because honor can be a very elegant trap. His brothers are near him. Bhima's breathing is already heavy with dislike. Arjuna says little. Nakula and Sahadeva are still in that dangerous state between youth and wisdom, where outrage rises fast, but obedience holds it down. And Shakuni, dear patient uncle, sounds delighted. He has the voice of a man arriving at a wedding feast. He proposes the game with lazy ease. Not forceful, not eager. That would look ugly. No, he drapes the invitation in softness, friendly sport, noble amusement, a little contest between kinsmen. What could be more civilized? Dhritarashtra hears all of it. He hears the mildness in Shakuni's tone, and because he is not a fool, he hears the iron hidden inside it. He knows this man. He knows those dice. He knows his son. For one brief, suspended moment, he could still stop it. He could shift his weight on the throne, raise one hand and say, "No. Enough. Not in this hall, not between these men." He could speak as king, as father, as elder, as one last gate still standing. Instead, he waits. That is his talent. Not cruelty first, not command. Waiting. Waiting while lesser men call it caution and wiser men call it weakness. The first throw comes. You hear it before you understand it. Dice striking polished wood. A quick scatter. A pause. Then the murmur rolls through the hall like wind through dry leaves. Shakuni has won. Of course he has. Yudhishthira wagers jewels first. Gold, necklaces, pearls from southern seas cool as moonlight, chests of coin, fine carpets, horses with silver bridles, each stake announced in a voice steady enough to fool a stranger. But Dhritarashtra is no stranger to trembling hidden under calm. He hears the slight tightness in Yudhishthira's throat. He hears Duryodhana leaning forward. He hears Karna's bracelets knock against the arm of his seat in excitement. He hears Vidura exhale through his nose once, sharply. That sound means trouble. In Hastinapura, it has meant trouble for decades. The dice fall again and again. Each time Shakuni calls the result with that same velvet certainty, as if fate itself had chosen to become his gambling partner. He does not need to boast. The man could cheat in his sleep, probably has. The treasures go first, then servants, then herds, then whole storehouses. The hall shifts with each loss. The murmurs grow louder, then softer, then louder again. Men who were reclining sit up. The smell of incense thickens in the heat of bodies. Someone drops a ring, and it skitters over stone with a bright, absurd little ping. You are close enough to feel how no one leaves. That is the ugliest part at first. Not one man stands and says, "This has gone too far." They stay, they listen, they let the afternoon sour around them. Dhritarashtra asks what has happened. His voice sounds troubled, almost startled. What happened? The servant nearest him answers, another wager lost, more wealth gone. Another throw against the sons of Pandu. Dhritarashtra nods slowly, as if receiving new information. But inside, he knows. He knew when the invitation was allowed. He knew when Shakuni touched those dice. He knew when Yudhishthira sat down. Still he asks. Then the dice again. The dry, skittering rattle. The murmur spreading outward. And his question. What happened? It is a dreadful little performance, and he performs it beautifully. Concerned king. Informed too late. Elder listening in sorrow, as events somehow unfold beneath him like weather no man could have predicted. Only this is not weather. This is his hall, his sun, his silence. The wagers grow larger. Yudhishthira is losing too quickly now. The pace itself becomes frightening. It is like hearing a cart race downhill after the axle breaks. Men speak faster. Fans move faster. Duryodhana can scarcely keep pleasure from his voice. He wants witnesses. He wants all of them. He wants Bhishma to hear it. He wants Drona to hear it. He wants Vidura to burn with it. Most of all, he wants the Pandavas to sit there and feel their greatness peeled away piece by piece. Yudhishthira stakes his kingdom, Indraprastha, the shining city raised from wilderness, the city with its bright halls and illusion lakes and jeweled chambers, the city that had lodged in Duryodhana's heart like a splinter. The dice fall. Shakuni wins. Now the hall truly changes. You can feel it in your own skin. The coolness of the floor no longer matters. Sweat gathers under collars. The air is too still. Silk clings. Someone near the back whispers a prayer under his breath. Dhritarashtra's fingers tighten once on the throne arm. Indraprastha is gone. He asks what happened. Again, he hears the answer. Again, he lets it stand. Vidura speaks now, and his words come like a blade finally drawn after too much patience. He warns the king plainly. He says disaster is unfolding in broad daylight. He says a man should abandon one son to save a family, one family to save a village, one village to save a kingdom. He says this game will destroy them all. There is no softness in him now, no careful court polish, just truth, sharp enough to cut through silk. Dhritarashtra hears every word and hates hearing it, because truth in public is unbearable to a weak man. It strips him naked without ever touching his clothes. Vidura is not only warning him, he is forcing him to feel the shape of his own cowardice while everyone listens. Duryodhana snaps back, angry, scornful, spoiled, even in triumph. He treats Vidura as a disloyal servant, as if loyalty means applauding while the house catches fire. Karna joins him. Shakuni says little. He does not need to. The dice are speaking for him, and the game continues. Yudhishthira now stakes his brothers. This is the moment when even seasoned men in the hall shift with discomfort, not loudly. Hastinapura does very little loudly when it wishes to appear respectable, but the change is there. Anklets pause. A robe whispers over stone. Someone's breath catches. First Nakula, lost, then Sahadeva, lost, then Arjuna. The room tightens around that name. Arjuna, whom warriors speak of with admiration and fear. Arjuna, bright as a drawn arrow. Arjuna, lost now by the fall of loaded cubes in an uncle's hand. Then Bhima. And even Shakuni sounds pleased with himself there, because Bhima is no small thing to win. Bhima is thunder tied into human shape. Winning him at dice feels like claiming a storm in a teacup. Ridiculous, obscene, very much in character for this family. Bhima says little, but the little is enough. His breathing changes. You can hear a beast enter the room without any door opening. Dhritarashtra knows that sound too. He heard it when Bhima was a boy, furious after one of Duryodhana's small cruelties. He hears it now, full grown, deeper, darker, carrying years of humiliation inside it, like banked fire. Still, the king asks what happened. Still, he is answered. Still, he does not stop it. Yudhishthira stakes himself, lost. At that, a shiver goes through the hall. A king has gambled away his own freedom. The son of Dharma has fallen beneath a dice board like any drunk in a roadside den. You are standing in the assembly hall when the understanding arrives all at once. There are no walls left inside this afternoon. Every boundary that should have held is gone. And yet it gets worse. Because Duryodhana is not satisfied. Men like him never are. Satisfaction would require a center. He has only appetite. He asks what remains. There is a pause then, a real one, long enough for the pigeons above to mutter again, long enough for someone outside in the courtyard to call to a servant and be hushed at once, long enough for the hall to feel suddenly like a place underwater. All sounds slowed and strange. What remains? Everyone knows the answer. Draupadi, queen of the Pandavas, princess of Panchala, fireborn, proud, dangerous to insult even in thought, and yet men are about to do much worse than think. Yudhishthira stakes her. The dice fall. Shakuni wins. And there it is. The world does not crack open. The ceiling does not collapse. No god hurls thunder through the roof. Just that little sound of dice touching wood. Small sound, enough to poison an age. Dhritarashtra asks what happened. This time, the answer seems to travel farther before it reaches him. Draupadi has been lost. Even saying it changes the air. Now Vidura speaks again, appalled beyond caution. He says what all decent men know. This is madness. Yudhishthira had no right to stake her after losing himself. A man who is no longer master of his own person cannot wager another. The argument hangs there like a lamp in darkness, simple, clear, saving. All Dhritarashtra has to do is seize it. All he has to do is agree. Instead, he hesitates. Hesitation, his oldest companion. Duryodhana does not hesitate. He sends for Draupadi at once. A servant goes. The hall waits. This waiting is worse than the throes. You can smell sweat now under the sandalwood. You can hear the tiny noises people make when shame begins to spread among them like fever. Bhishma says little. Drona says little. Kripa says little. Great men become very interested in silence when speech might cost them comfort. The servant returns. Draupadi will not come. Not because she is timid, because she asks a question first. Was she lost lawfully? If her husband had already lost himself, by what right was she staked? The question travels into the hall and stops everything for a heartbeat. Even Shakuni cannot rattle dice over that immediately. It is too clean a question, too exact. No fury in it, no pleading. Just Dharma laid on the floor between them like a mirror. Dhritarashtra hears it. He hears the hall fail to answer. He hears old men shifting in their seats, the rustle of robes where courage should be. He hears Bhishma speak at last, but uncertainly, saying dharma is subtle, difficult, tangled, which it is. But sometimes men call something subtle because they do not want to call it shameful. Duryodhana sends again, this time harsher. The servant goes, returns. Draupadi still refuses, still asks the same question. Now Duryodhana's patience breaks. He orders Dushasana to fetch her. You can feel the entire hall recoil without moving. Dushasana rises gladly. There are men who need wine to become ugly. Dushasana needs only permission. His heavy steps leave the hall. The sounds fade down the corridor toward the women's chambers. Then, waiting. Then distant noise, faint at first, a protest, a commotion of startled attendants. Then louder footsteps, rougher, dragging, and Dhritarashtra sits on the throne and listens. That is the scene, not sight, sound, the slap of bare feet or sandals against stone, the scrape of cloth pulled hard, women's voices in alarm, Dushasana's breath loud with effort and triumph. And then Draupadi enters the hall against her will. Dhritarashtra cannot see her, but he hears enough to know. He hears the strain in her breathing. He hears the outrage she is holding upright by sheer force. He hears the change in the assembly itself, because shame has a sound. Men go still, jewelry stops moving, fans pause midair. She has been dragged from the inner chambers. She is in a single garment. She is unprepared for court, and all of Hastinapura is listening. If you stand there long enough, you feel it like pressure in your own ribs. This is the moment, this exact moment. The king could stop it with one word. He does not. Draupadi speaks. She does not break. That is important. Her voice may tremble with fury, but it does not collapse. She asks a question again. Was she won justly or not? Let the elders answer. Let the wise men answer. Let the guardians of Dharma answer in the open court, where they sit fat with reputation. No one gives her what she deserves. Vikarna, one of Dhritarashtra's own sons, young enough still to have some unspoiled nerve in him, rises and says she was not won lawfully. His voice shakes, but he says it. The hall stirs. For one brief, flashing instant, truth comes from the wrong side of the family, like a lamp unexpectedly lit in a thief's house. Dhritarashtra hears his own son speak better than he has spoken. That must sting. Karna crushes it at once. His words come hard and hot, eager to wound. He sides with Duryodhana. He insults Draupadi. He says she is no better than a serving woman now. He urges that she be stripped of the last dignity left to her. The hall drops into a silence so complete that even the pigeons above are quiet. Then Dushasana moves toward her. What follows reaches the Dhritarashtra in fragments. The rush of cloth, the gasp of women, the shout that breaks from more than one throat at once. Draupadi turns from men to the divine. She has asked the court has failed her. So she gives herself to Krishna in that instant with all the force of a drowning hand reaching upward. And then something changes. Dushasana pulls, cloth gathers. He pulls again, more cloth, again. What should end does not end. The pile grows, silk against stone, linen against silk. The sound becomes uncanny, almost ridiculous in its abundance, a long rustling river filling the hall. Dushasana, who set out to humiliate a queen, finds himself doing the world's most exhausting laundry. Even in a moment like this, there is something almost absurd about him. He keeps pulling as if stubbornness might defeat a miracle. His breath grows ragged. The cloth keeps coming. Men begin to murmur in amazement now, fear replacing excitement. The scent of sweat sharpens. Somewhere, someone whispers Krishna's name. Dushasana stumbles in his effort, and still the garment renews itself. At last, he tires. He cannot finish what he began. He falls back, defeated by endless fabric and his own foul ambition. And the hall, which has watched everything, now sits with the proof that a woman abandoned by men has been guarded by something greater than all of them. Bhima erupts. You hear him before you understand the words. It comes out of him like a storm tearing loose from a mountain. His oath shakes the room. He swears he will one day tear Dushasana apart in battle and drink his life breath. He swears he will break Duryodhana's thigh for the gesture that insolent prince now makes toward Draupadi. Because Duryodhana, drunk on shame and power, strikes his own thigh and invites her to sit there, in a full court, before elders, before the blind king. There are vulgar men. And then there is Duryodhana, who can turn triumph into filth in a single motion. Bhima's vow lands like iron dropped onto stone. Everyone hears it. Even those who think the day belongs to Duryodhana hear the future arriving in Bhima's voice. Dhritarashtra hears it too. At last, fear reaches him more strongly than preference. It is not wisdom that wakes him, not righteousness, fear of omens, fear of curses, fear of Bhima's oath, fear of the trembling order of the house around him, fear that this afternoon has gone so far the gods themselves have leaned in to watch. Some say Gandhari is there behind her blindfold, silent as carved stone. If she speaks, it is little. If she does not speak, her silence is louder than drums. Dhritarashtra feels the whole hall tipping. He moves then, at last, too late for innocence, not yet too late for damage control. He addresses Draupadi with sudden warmth, calling her daughter, praising her virtue, trying to pour balm over a wound he allowed to be opened. It is an awkward, urgent kindness, the sort a man reaches for when he has stood in a doorway while the house burned and only now fetched water. He offers her a boon. Draupadi asks first for Yudhishthira's freedom. Granted. He offers another. She asks for the freedom of Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, and Sahadeva with their weapons. Granted. He offers a third. And here she does something extraordinary. She refuses excess. She takes no more than she needs. She does not ask for kingdoms, treasure, vengeance, or the humiliation of her enemies. She leaves the hall taller than the men who trapped her in it. That too, Dhritarashtra must hear. He restores what has been lost. He sends the Pandavas away freed, their wealth and liberty returned. For a moment it appears the disaster has been checked at the edge. For a moment, you can feel the release moving through the hall. People breathe again. Fans resume their slow sweep. Jewelry stirs. Men murmur that perhaps the old king has done the right thing after all. Perhaps the house may yet stand. Perhaps this stain can still be washed, though everyone knows some cloth never truly comes clean. The Pandavas prepare to depart. And then Duryodhana cannot bear it. Of course he cannot. A man like that would rather set fire to his own bedding than watch another sleep comfortably. His resentment comes back instantly, hot and childish. Karna supports him. Shakuni is ready before anyone asks, because men like him always keep fresh poison on hand. They say the Pandavas, once freed, remain dangerous. They say unfinished grievance is worse than open victory. They say one more game will settle everything cleanly. Cleanly, wonderful word, used here with a straight face. Dhritarashtra, who found one brief pulse of courage, now feels it drain away under his son's displeasure. That is how it goes with him. Again and again, he can be brave against abstraction, against omens, against distant disaster, but not against Duryodhana standing close, angry, wounded in pride, pressing like a hand against the soft place in his will. So he wavers again. You can hear it in his breathing. Vidura objects. Again. Others are troubled. Again. But trouble is not action. Duryodhana asks, demands, pushes, and Dhritarashtra folds. That is how worlds are ruined sometimes. Not by a demon king hurling mountains, by a tired old father deciding he would rather be weak one more time. The second game is called. The Pandavas are summoned back before they have even properly left. Imagine that walk. The heat outside after the hall's dim coolness. The taste of humiliation still bitter in the mouth. The knowledge that you were freed and then tugged back like a fish not yet exhausted enough for sport. You are there in the corridor as sandals turn once more toward the assembly. The whole palace must feel diseased by now. The same pillars, the same incense, the same throne, the same uncle with his beloved dice, those little chattering demons he handles like prayer beads. Terms are set swiftly, no long peeling away of wealth this time, no gradual stripping, just one throw, sharp as a knife. 12 years in the forest, 1 year hidden. If discovered in that 13th year, exile begins again. A kingdom packed into a single toss. The dice fall, Shakuni wins. Of course, there is almost something insulting in how unsurprised everyone is. The hall does not gasp this time the way it did before. Shock has been spent. What remains is the dull, sick certainty of seeing a man do exactly what his weakness promised he would do. The Pandavas are exiled. Draupadi will go with them. The court that failed to protect her now watches her leave. Bhima speaks again, and his vows return, heavy as monsoon thunder stored behind hills. Arjuna speaks too, controlled, but terrible in another way. The younger brothers burn in silence. Yudhishthira accepts what has been done, because that is his greatness and his flaw. Once he enters the net of duty, he will walk through pain rather than tear it. Dhritarashtra sits above it all and listens to the future being written in human voices. If you stand near enough, you can almost hear his thoughts struggling. He did not want this. That is true. He allowed it. Also true. The human heart is very good at placing those two truths in separate rooms and pretending they have never met. The Pandavas leave the hall. Their ornaments will soon be exchanged for bark garments, their soft beds for forest ground, the scent of sandalwood for leaf mold and smoke, chariot wheels for the long ache of walking. Draupadi goes with them. She has entered this hall as queen, been treated as spoil, and departs still somehow more royal than the court itself. Dhritarashtra listens to them go. The footfalls recede. Bhima's are unmistakable, Arjuna's measured, Yudhishthira steady despite everything. The twins light but tense. Draupadi's steps neither hurried nor broken, then less, then fainter, then gone. And what remains in the Sabha after that is not victory, not really. Duryodhana may think it is. Shakuni may purr over it. Karna may defend it. Dushasana may grin like a fool who survived his own indecency. But the hall itself seems to know better. The incense has burned low. The air smells stale now, mixed with sweat and something else harder to name. Fear, perhaps, or consequence arriving before it has fully taken shape. You are still standing there as courtiers begin to move again. Low voices, soft sandals, the practical untidiness that follows moral catastrophe. Someone must lift the fallen cloth. Someone must lead the elders out. Someone must pretend tomorrow is simply another day of petitions and tax disputes and temple offerings. That is the strange genius of palaces. They keep going. A kingdom can stumble into sin at noon and still expect dinner served on time. Dhritarashtra remains on the throne a little longer. His hands are cold now, despite the heat. The wood beneath his fingers feels less like authority than like something he clung to while drowning. He has preserved his son from immediate disappointment and condemned him to a larger doom. He has spared himself one argument and invited a war. He has asked what happened so many times that perhaps part of him almost believes he does not know. Almost, but not quite. He knows the sound of Draupadi's question still hanging in the hall. He knows the roar in Bhima's vow. He knows Vidura's disgust. He knows that Bhishma's silence and Drona's silence and his own silence have together built a road no one will enjoy walking. Outside, the afternoon has begun to lean toward evening. The heat softens by a grain. Long shadows stretch across the courtyards. Somewhere near the stables, a horse shakes its harness and snorts. In the kitchens, ghee warms for the night's meal. Life, absurdly, continues. You can smell the river if the wind turns. The Ganga moving beyond the palace walls, old and indifferent, carrying flower offerings and ash and the reflections of kings who never last. Inside the women's chambers, attendants speak in shaken murmurs. In some quiet room, Gandhari removes nothing because she has chosen darkness and will keep it. In another chamber, Duryodhana is probably still flushed with triumph, pacing like a man who thinks he has won everything, when in truth he has just purchased 18 days of apocalypse at the cost of his soul. And Shakuni, well, Shakuni is likely turning the dice over in his fingers with the private satisfaction of a cook whose recipe came out exactly as planned. He likes his disasters seasoned. Dhritarashtra rises at last. Servants come quickly. One offers an arm. He takes it. The throne room is behind him now, but not really. Some rooms you leave. Some go on inside your ribs forever. As he walks the familiar corridors, counting turns by memory. The palace sounds strangely hollow. His sandals touch stone. Distant voices drift and vanish. Oil lamps are being lit one by one, each with a soft puff and tiny flare. The smell of sesame oil joins the sandalwood. He has survived the afternoon. That is not the same as escaping it, because the dice are quiet now, but the vows they drew from men are not. Those will travel into the forest, into exile, into training grounds and prayer fires and sleepless nights, into the iron hearts of suns, into the mouth of war. And long after the board has been put away, long after the hall has been swept and perfumed and made respectable again, Dhritarashtra will still hear the same sounds if the night is quiet enough. Dice on wood, a woman asking what law remains, a brother vowing ruin, his own voice asking what happened, as if he did not know, as if not knowing had ever been the problem. The conch shells blow at Kurukshetra, but Dhritarashtra is not there. He is in the palace, listening. Morning after morning, the old halls of Hastinapura wake before dawn. Servants move with lowered voices. Ghee lamps hiss softly in their niches. Somewhere in an inner courtyard, a peacock cries like a hinge being torn from a gate. And then footsteps. Always footsteps. You can feel the whole palace tense around them. Sandals on stone, a pause at the threshold, dust carried in from far away, the smell of horses, sweat, leather, sun-baked earth. Sanjaya has returned from seeing what no one should have to see. Dhritarashtra knows him by breath before he speaks. The blind king sits upright on a carved seat that suddenly feels too large. His fingers grip the armrests until the wood creaks. Gandhari is nearby, silent behind her cloth. Vidura stands somewhere to one side, quiet as a held thought. Outside, the city waits. Inside, one man begins to describe the end of a world. On the first morning, before the first great fall, there is still room for hope to pace in circles. Dhritarashtra asks the question he has been carrying like a fever. What did they do, his sons and the sons of Pandu, gathered on the holy field, eager for battle? Sanjaya answers, and the answer comes not as comfort, but as a flood. He tells of armies drawn in lines so vast they seem to have their own horizon, of banners snapping in the hot wind, of elephants restless under gold-trimmed armor, of chariots ringing like metal prayer bowls when the wheels strike stone, of dust rising before sunrise until the dawn itself looks bruised. And then Arjuna asks Krishna to drive between the armies. Dhritarashtra cannot see that pause. He can only hear it described. His nephew, greatest archer alive, looking at grandfathers, teachers, cousins, friends, looking and faltering, bow slipping from his hand, heart breaking before the battle even begins. And Krishna speaks. Sanjaya's voice changes when he tells this part. It grows slower, steadier, as if the air in the room has thickened. He repeats that Krishna spoke of the soul that does not end, of duty, of action without clinging, of the great wheel of life and time, of forms beyond forms, of the terrible vastness behind the world men think they know. Dhritarashtra hears the highest teaching in the world as battlefield correspondence. Imagine that, the secret at the center of existence, delivered like military news to an old man who spent his life refusing the obvious. You are in that chamber with him now. You can smell lamp smoke and old silk and the faint medicinal scent of sandal paste on tired skin. Outside, a pigeon flutters under the eaves. Inside, Eternity is summarized between casualty reports. Then the waiting ends. The battle begins. Day after day, Sanjaya returns. The rhythm becomes its own punishment. At dawn, the king listens for wheels. By noon, he counts hours with his pulse. At dusk, he hears them coming. Each evening, the messenger enters carrying dust from Kurukshetra in the hem of his robe. The palace floors stay cool, polished, indifferent. But Sanjaya brings the field with him. The smell reaches the king first. Dry grass crushed under horses, iron warmed all day in the sun, the bitter sting of sweat dried into leather. War has a smell, even when it is far away. Bhishma leads first. Old Bhishma, the grandfather who was never king and always more than a king. The man who raised princes, carried the house of Kuru on his back for decades, and called that burden duty until duty became a trap with his own name on it. Sanjaya says Bhishma moves through the field like a white flame. He breaks lines, he scatters elephants, he leaves the Pandava ranks reeling day after day. Men who grew up touching his feet now loose arrows at him. He blesses them with one hand and ruins them with the other. That is family for you in Hastinapura. If they are not hugging, they are usually trying to end each other. Dhritarashtra listens and says very little, because Bhishma belongs to both sides, because every victory of Bhishma's feels temporary, and every wound he inflicts comes back in the night, sounding like consequence. Sanjaya tells him of omens too. Dust storms, strange cries, the sun looking dim at the wrong hour. Animals uneasy before the shouting begins. The field itself seems unwilling. Still they fight. You can feel the heat in that palace room as afternoon leans into evening. No breeze, just heavy air and the sticky drag of silk at the neck. Dhritarashtra's blind face turned toward Sanjaya, as if turning harder could somehow become seeing. Then comes the 10th day. Sanjaya's voice is tired before the words even arrive. The Pandavas have done what they swore they dreaded. They placed Shikhandi before Arjuna. Bhishma, seeing one he would not strike, lowered his guard. Arjuna's arrows came in wave after wave. Bhishma fell, not to earth exactly, to arrows, onto a bed of them, held above the ground by the very weapons that brought him down. For a while, Dhritarashtra says nothing at all. The silence after that news is long enough for a lamp to sputter out. A servant rushes to relight it, though the king cannot see. Habit survives where wisdom doesn't. That palace runs on habit. At last the old man asks whether Bhishma still breathes. Yes, Sanjaya says, he still breathes. He chooses not to leave yet. He lies waiting for the right season, the right sun, the right final hour. Only Bhishma would turn dying into an appointment. Dhritarashtra bows his head. He remembers, though he does not say it aloud, the old warrior's hand guiding him through corridors when he was small. The way Bhishma's voice could fill a hall without strain. The smell of bowstring wax and sacred ash when the grandsire returned from morning rites. A pillar has fallen, and still the house must stand somehow. It does not stand well. Drona takes command next. That news reaches the palace like a fresh tightening of the throat. Drona, the teacher. Drona whose hands trained Kaurava and Pandava alike. Drona who taught princes to strike so cleanly that destruction could almost look elegant. He comes to the field with a plan. Capture Yudhishthira, break the war by taking the king alive. Again and again, Sanjaya tells of formations like moving mazes, of lines folding and unfolding under shouted signals, of Arjuna being lured away, of Drona pressing forward like a storm front with purpose. Dhritarashtra listens to all of it. But one day arrives that changes the taste of every other, the day of Abhimanyu. Even before Sanjaya speaks the boy's name, something in the room goes cold. Abhimanyu, Arjuna's son, Subhadra's son, Krishna's nephew, young enough that some in the palace still think of him in festival clothes, laughing, gold dust on his forehead, not yet shaped by war. Sanjaya says the Kauravas formed the Chakra Vyuha, a spinning labyrinth of warriors. Arjuna was far away, drawn off. The boy knew how to enter the formation, but not how to come out. Still he went in. Of course he did. Young princes in this family are forever being asked to do impossible things by older men with very serious faces. Sanjaya describes the chariot cutting into the formation like a bright blade. Abhimanyu scattering veterans, breaking ranks, holding his own beyond all expectation. Then the ring closes, too many against one. His bow broken, his horses gone, fighting on with whatever remains. Wheel, sword, sheer courage, youth refusing to understand the arithmetic. Dhritarashtra's breathing changes. He does not interrupt. That almost makes it worse, because he knows whose side did this. He knows whose sons and allies surrounded a boy and brought him down by numbers when they could not do it cleanly. The king's own sons, his own house. The room smells suddenly of warm oil and human grief. Thick, close, airless. If you were standing there, you would want to open every shutter, but no one moves. When Sanjaya finishes, Gandhari lets out one slow breath through her nose. Vidura shifts his weight once. Dhritarashtra lifts a hand and then lets it fall. He had been silent in the dice hall. Now the silence returns with interest. The next day, Arjuna learns what happened. Sanjaya says grief hits him like a weapon. The father swears Jayadratha will fall before sunset on the following day, or he himself will enter fire. Now the war requires a clock. Dhritarashtra hears of the great push toward Jayadratha, of the Kauravas layering defense upon defense around the Sindhu king like walls around fear, of Satyaki carving forward, of Bhima raging through lines, of Drona still pressing his own deadly purpose, and through all of it, Arjuna driving toward one name. The day stretches, the sun leans west, dust fills the air, horses foam, wheels crack, men who have forgotten breakfast and mercy alike continue because the vow allows nothing else. Then, at the edge of defeat, a darkness comes over the field. Sanjaya describes warriors looking up, thinking the sun has set. Jayadratha emerges. A moment later, the light returns. Arjuna's arrow flies. Jayadratha falls. In the palace, Dhritarashtra exhales in a way that sounds almost like defeat, discovering a new floor beneath itself. One more ally gone, one more promise kept in a war built from promises that should never have been made. Night should have brought relief. It does not. That same terrible stretch of darkness belongs to Ghatotkacha. Bhima's Rakshasa son rises into the war like the night taking shape. Sanjaya says the battlefield becomes confusion itself, illusions, crashes in the dark, shapes too large where no shapes should be, elephants turning, horses screaming in terror, men striking at shadows and finding something worse. Even hearing about it from the safety of a chamber, the skin along Dhritarashtra's arms prickles. You can almost hear it with him. The odd, hollow thunder of fighting after sunset, when the world no longer feels properly sorted. Torches guttering, commands swallowed by darkness, armor clanging where no enemy seems visible. Duryodhana, desperate, presses Karna. Use the divine weapon, the one kept for Arjuna. Use it now, or the army breaks. And Karna does. The weapon flies. Ghatotkacha falls, vast as a toppled hill. But even in falling, he crushes enemies below. Even in ending, he takes much with him. Sanjaya says Krishna is pleased at Arjuna's side when he hears Karna has spent that weapon. Pleased. That word lands strangely in the chamber. Dhritarashtra sits with it. Because war has reached that stage where a father's grief on one side becomes strategic relief on the other. Everyone still talks about righteousness. Meanwhile, sons are being spent like arrows. On the 15th day, Drona becomes the center of the field and the center of a trap. Drupada falls, Virata falls. Drona goes on like a machine built for ruin. The Pandavas decide he cannot be overcome in the straightforward way, so they come at his heart. An elephant named Ashwathama is brought down. Bhima shouts that Ashwathama is gone. Drona doubts. Then he asks the one man he still believes, incapable of bending truth, Yudhishthira. Sanjaya says the answer comes carefully. Ashwathama is dead, and then, lower, the part about the elephant. But grief does not wait for full volume. Drona hears enough. His will leaves him. He lays down weapons. He sinks inward, toward meditation, toward an end not made for battlefields. Drishtadhyumna reaches him there and completes the work for which he was born. When Sanjaya tells this, Dhritarashtra recoils as though struck. Drona too. Drona too. Teacher, commander, old companion of the house. Gone through half-truth and exhaustion. The palace feels smaller now. Each report takes away not only a person, but a whole region of memory. Hallways, lessons, festivals, hunts, marriages. Each death empties rooms in the mind. Then Ashwathama, in rage for his father, unleashes the Narayanastra. Sanjaya describes a weapon that cannot be met by force. The only safety is surrender. Lay down arms. Bow. Refuse resistance. Dhritarashtra listens to the absurdity of warriors surviving by submission in the middle of war. Even Bhima has to be forced down, Sanjaya says. That detail almost shakes a dry, humorless breath from Vidura nearby. Bhima, who would argue with a thunderstorm if it looked at him wrong, having to be physically pushed into survival. Some men are born brave. Some are born unable to recognize a useful instruction. But the weapon passes. The war does not. Then comes Karna's command. By now, each new morning sounds like another plate added to a scale that has already snapped. Still the rites are performed in camp. Still commanders are appointed. Still trumpets blow, as if ceremony can make the next slaughter feel orderly. Karna takes the field with Shalya driving his chariot. Sanjaya tells of taunts between them, of Karna's fury, of his relentless advance, of Yudhishthira, wounded and shamed, of Arjuna, stung by his brother's bitter words, nearly turning his vow against his own family before Krishna knots the madness loose just in time. Even among the Pandavas, the war has begun to crack the walls. Then Vrishasena, Karna's son, falls before his father's eyes. The air in the chamber tightens again. Dhritarashtra knows that pain too well already, and yet more of it is coming for him. At last, the duel arrives. Arjuna and Karna. The one match everyone has been carrying for years, like a sealed jar of oil, near an open flame. Sanjaya's voice grows exact here, the field pulling back around them. Krishna on one chariot, Shalya on the other, arrows crossing so quickly they sound like heavy rain on leaves, standards shaking, horses lathered, sun glaring overhead. Karna sends the serpent weapon. The shot should have ended Arjuna, but Krishna drives the chariot down into the earth at the crucial instant. The arrow takes Arjuna's crown instead. The diadem shatters. A little lower and the war changes. A little lower and the world changes. But not today. Then the curse ripens. Karna's wheel sinks into the ground. Mud, torn earth, broken field, old words from old wrongs returning right on time. He strains to free it. He appeals to fairness, to rule, to pause. And Krishna answers with memory. Where was fairness in the dice hall? Where was rule when Abhimanyu was surrounded? Where was pause when Draupadi was dragged by the hair? Sanjaya does not need to embroider. The names are enough. Arjuna looses the final arrow. Karna falls. The sun seems to lower with him. Dhritarashtra leans back, as though the blow has traveled through distance and entered his own chest. Duryodhana's greatest friend, the strongest remaining shield around his son, gone. In another room somewhere, perhaps, a servant drops a metal vessel. The clang rings through the corridor and vanishes. Such small sounds continue. Water being poured, doors sliding closed, a woman calling softly for a maid. The world is rude enough to keep moving. By the 18th day, very little remains, except momentum and grief. Shalya takes command for the Kauravas. A command of ashes, really. He arranges what is left. Yudhishthira goes at him directly and brings him down. More kings fall. More names are carried back in Sanjaya's tired mouth. Shakuni too is brought low at last. The gambler runs out of throws. And then Duryodhana flees. That word enters the chamber like a draught through a cracked wall. Flees. Not because he's a coward exactly. Because there is almost nothing left to stand with. Brothers gone. Friends gone. Great pillars of the army all claimed. He runs to a lake and hides within it by yogic power. Water stilled around him. It is an image so strange that even now it glows in the dark. The prince who dragged a kingdom into war crouching beneath a silent lake because the world above has finally become too expensive. Hunters see. Word travels. The Pandavas come. Sanjaya tells of taunts at the water's edge, of Yudhishthira offering single combat, of Krishna furious at such generosity, of Duryodhana rising at last with mace in hand. Bhima faces him. Of course, Bhima faces him. Some endings are waiting from the moment the insult is first spoken. You are standing there in imagination now, on the edge of that open ground. Evening light, dust cooling at last, the smell of trampled reeds and wet earth by the lake. Two men circling with maces, bodies already worn by 18 days and 13 years before those days. The duel is long. Duryodhana is skillful, very skillful. For all his pride, the man can fight. Bhima is heavier, stronger, driving with old vows in every swing. The blows ring out. Then comes the strike that should not have come. Bhima breaks Duryodhana's thighs. Illegal in the rules of mace combat. Entirely legal in the deeper accounting Bhima has carried since the dice hall, when Duryodhana slapped his own thigh and mocked Draupadi before the court. Duryodhana falls, not gone at once, broken, breathing, proud even then. Sanjaya says he still spoke fiercely from the ground, spoke of kingship enjoyed, pleasures tasted, a warrior's end. Spoke bitterly of how the Pandavas had won. Then the messenger stops, because now he must say the thing beneath all the other things. Duryodhana will not rise again. Dhritarashtra makes a sound no courtier has heard from him before. Not command, not outrage, not ceremonial grief. A father's cry, raw, old, helpless. It tears through the chamber and into the corridor beyond. Servants freeze. Somewhere, A woman begins weeping simply because she has heard that sound and knows what it means. The firstborn, the child whose birth came with jackals and bad wind. The infant Vidura had warned him against. The boy he held anyway. The prince he could never bear to deny. The man who took every indulgence as permission and every silence as blessing. Broken by a lake. For a while, Sanjaya can go no further. Then he does, because the war may be finished, but night still has one more cruelty hidden under its cloak. Ashwathama survives. So do Kripa and Kritavarma. They come to the dying Duryodhana and see what remains of the Kaurava cause lying on the earth. Vengeance, which has already swallowed half the world, asks for one more mouthful. That night, they ride to the Pandava camp. Men are asleep, fires low, the battlefield finally quiet after days of iron and shouting. Ashwatthama enters like rage that has forgotten how to be human. Dhrishtadyumna falls. Shikhandi falls. The sons of Draupadi, sleeping, are mistaken for the Pandavas or simply taken in their place. However you arrange the details, dawn still arrives, carrying the same sorrow. When Sanjaya reports this final dark work, even war-worn words seem exhausted. The victory camp is a house of mourning. Draupadi's sons are gone. Abhimanyu was already gone. Katotkacha gone. So many gone that the idea of winning begins to look like a joke told by a cruel uncle after too much wine. Dhritarashtra hears it all, every name, every branch cut from every family tree. And then there is nothing left to report except aftermath. No formations, no vows for tomorrow, no commanders to appoint, only widows. The palace changes before the armies even return. You can hear it. The corridors that once rang with armored steps are full of softer sounds now. Anklets dragging instead of chiming. Bangles knocked together by trembling hands. Doors opening at all hours. Women moving in groups because no one wants to receive news alone. The air smells of extinguished lamps, wet hair, incense burned too long, old flowers turning at the edges. From one quarter comes high crying, then a collapse into low moaning. From another, silence so complete it is worse. Some grief shouts, some just sits down and does not move. Dhritarashtra remains where he is for long stretches, unable to command this, unable to dismiss it, unable even to pretend it is temporary. 100 sons, not all noble, not all wise, some cruel, some foolish, some barely more than names behind Duryodhana's shadow. Still his. Dushasana gone, the wild second son who followed his brother's worst impulses as eagerly as a dog follows a hunter's horse. Vikarna gone too, and that one hurts in a different way. The son who once spoke for Draupadi in the dice hall, the son who had one clean flame of justice in him and was still burned with the rest. Dushala's husband, Jayadratha, gone. Her grief reaches him as grief for a daughter now, widening the wound. And Duryodhana over all of them like the first crack from which the wall finally collapsed. If you were there, you would feel how huge the palace has become. Too much marble, too many chambers, too much echo. Great houses are splendid when full. When emptied by consequence, they feel like punishment. At last, no one is speaking. Even Sanjaya has finished. The messenger who brought the field home in words stands quiet. His throat is dry from carrying 18 days of sun, dust, vows, and endings into the same room. Dhritarashtra sits with his hands open on his knees. No dice now, no arguments, no Shakuni smiling, no Duryodhana pressing for one more indulgence. Just the faint crackle of lamp wicks and the distant sound of women weeping in 100 corners of the palace. The war is over, the listening is not, because now he must hear what remains after noise. Sandals of widows in the corridor, ritual water poured into bronze bowls, priests murmuring funeral hymns before sunrise, cloth torn for mourning, the city itself moving more softly, as if even carts and oxen understand. And underneath it all, the thing he cannot outshout any longer. He had been warned, at birth, at the dice game, at every turn in the road. Now the road has ended where they said it would. The blind king sits in the dark palace and listens to the kingdom breathe through broken teeth. Outside, dawn will come again over Kurukshetra. The field will steam under the early sun. Vultures will wheel high where banners once flew. The Ganga will keep moving because rivers are not impressed by dynasties. Inside Hastinapura, the night seems never to fully lift. Only the sounds change. From war to mourning to the long, unbearable quiet after both. 3 days pass, nothing improves. The smoke of the funeral pyres still clings to Hastinapura like old wool. It settles into curtains, into hair, into the carved grooves of door frames. Even the sandalwood, burned for rites, cannot quite hide it. The palace smells of incense, ghee, wet ash, and grief that has not slept. Dhritarashtra sits where they place him, hands folded, back straight, a king in posture only. One by one, the rites go on. Water poured, names recited, offerings made for sons who once thundered through these halls in silk and mail, laughing too loudly, eating too much, believing they had endless tomorrows. Now every name lands like a stone. Duryodhana, Dushasana, Vikarna, on and on, 100 times. You can almost feel the air change with each one, as if the room itself bows a little lower. The old king hears Gandhari breathing beside him, slow and disciplined. He hears Kunti somewhere farther back, bracelets barely touching as she keeps still. He hears widows swallowing, sobs because once they begin, they may never stop. Then word comes, the Pandavas are coming. Of course they are. The victors must bow to the old king, sons to their uncle, nephews to the father of the men they struck down. Dharma has a taste for difficult meals, and this one is served hot. Dhritarashtra says he will receive them. His voice is calm enough, too calm. Inside him, something hot has not gone out. It has only sunk lower. For 18 days, he listened to his sons fall one after another. He listened to Bhima's vows ripen. He listened to Duryodhana's end by the lake. Thighs broken, pride still talking after the body had given up all useful arguments. And Bhima did that. Bhima with his storm breath and heavy steps. Bhima who swore in the assembly hall that he would bring ruin to the Kauravas, and then, with the patience of fate, went and did exactly that. The corridor outside fills with sound, not war sound, no chariot wheels, no conchis, just sandals on stone, soft fabric, ornaments faintly brushing against one another. Krishna's step is almost impossible to place, light and measured, as if he belongs to the floor before he touches it. Yudhishthira walks carefully. Arjuna lighter, Nakula and Sahadeva like matched notes. Bhima unmistakable, broad, grounded, carrying his own weather with him. You are there in the hall when they enter. The lamps are low, though it is day. Their flames tremble in the faint crosswind from the courtyard. The marble underfoot is cool. Somewhere nearby, someone has placed fresh jasmine in copper bowls. Sweetness over smoke. It almost works. The brothers bow first to Gandhari, then to Dhritarashtra. Yudhishthira goes near and lets his grief speak plainly. He tells the old king they stand before him in sorrow, not triumph. He offers himself, the kingdom, his obedience, whatever comfort remains possible in a burned-out world. Dhritarashtra blesses him. His hands rest on Yudhishthira's head. The touch is steady. If you did not know better, you might think the old man had become all forgiveness in one night. Arjuna comes next. Then the twins. Each is embraced, each is blessed. And then Dhritarashtra asks for Bhima. It lands in the room like a dropped blade. No one says anything at first, but silence has weight. This one is heavy. Bhima moves. Krishna does too. He has read the old king from the beginning. Read him in the dice hall. Read him in the war. Read him now in the tiny tightening of breath, in the way the fingers flex, in the old strength still coiled inside a body, thinned by age and grief, but not emptied of power. Long ago, they had made an iron image of Bhima for practice. Massive chest, thick arms, built to endure blows. Krishna brings it forward in that half-beat before danger becomes event. Smoothly, cleanly, as if this had always been the order of things. Dhritarashtra opens his arms. He believes Bhima is before him, and he embraces, not gently, not like an uncle, not like a grieving elder, like a man who has been waiting to close his hands around the shape of his hatred. The iron groans, then shrieks. Metal bends under his grip with a sound so wrong it freezes the spine. A hollow, crushing crack follows. Then another. Then the entire hall hears what Bhima would have sounded like if Krishna had been one breath slower. The statue collapses in his arms. Pieces strike the floor. A heavy clang. Then smaller pieces. Then powdered grit skittering over stone. For a moment, nobody moves. You can smell hot metal, sharp and bitter, suddenly mixed with lamp smoke. The sound hangs in the pillars. Even the mourning women in the back go still. Dhritarashtra is panting. The strength in him has burst out all at once. It leaves him shaking. His hands are full of splintered iron dust. And then he understands, not by sight, by silence, by the shape of the room after the sound, by Krishna's presence, standing there exactly where truth becomes unavoidable. The old king lets out a cry, not of triumph, of horror. He thinks for one wild instant that he has done it, that grief has turned him into the thing he spent a lifetime pretending not to be. Then Krishna tells him, Bhima lives. The man he crushed was iron. The one he wanted still stands. Relief comes, and with it, shame so hot it almost feels like another wound. Dhritarashtra sags where he stands. His voice breaks. He admits what everyone now knows. He wanted Bhima gone. He wanted, just for a breath, one son repaid with one nephew. He who had spent years drowning in the consequences of partiality has, in the first test after the war, reached for it again with both hands. Bhima remains silent. That is almost the strangest part. You might expect thunder. Instead, there is only breath. The big warrior standing still. The memory of iron breaking, where his ribs might have been. Krishna tells the old king, this rage is no surprise, but it cannot rule the room. Not now, not after all that has already been burned for it. Then the real Bhima steps forward. This time, Dhritarashtra embraces him as an old man should, not crushing, not avenging, just holding briefly the warm living body of the nephew he nearly destroyed because he could not destroy fate. Bhima allows it, which is a kind of greatness, though he probably would rather wrestle a tiger than stand politely in this family reunion from the underworld. Gandhari says little. She does not need to. Her stillness has become its own kind of speech. Blindfold tied, spine like a staff, she receives the Pandavas. She grieves them too, in a way, because every survivor now belongs to the same ruined house. But when Bhima bows to her, the air changes again. She remembers Duryodhana's broken body. She remembers Dushasana brought low. She remembers 100 sons, each carried away by the tide of vows and answers and old offenses finally collected. Her grief comes sharp. She tells them, with the terrible plainness grief allows, that victory tastes thin when everyone who might have celebrated lies on the riverbank as ash. Later, when they go to the field, she will move among the fallen by inner sight and curse Krishna himself. But for now, the hall simply holds what it can hold: blessing, accusation, exhaustion, restraint. No one leaves comforted, only finished. The rites continue through the days that follow. The Ganga receives ashes. Priests chant until their voices rasp. Sesame and water are offered. The river keeps moving, green-brown and patient beneath the pale sky. Smoke drifts over the reeds. Crows gather in peepal trees and complain, as crows always do, because even the end of a dynasty does not improve their manners. You stand by the water in the cool of early morning. Mist clings low over the surface. The wet mud smells rich and clean after all the burnt air of the city. Men in white pour, libations with trembling hands. Women weep into the edge of their veils. Dhritarashtra, guided carefully, offers water for the sons he raised badly and loved completely. Then Kunti speaks, and the river seems to stop. Her voice is low, but there are some truths that do not need volume. She tells her surviving sons that Karna, whom they hated, fought, and finally brought down, was their elder brother, her firstborn, set afloat long ago before shame and fear had learned to dress themselves as prudence. The words fall into everything. Yudhishthira staggers under them. Bhima inhales as if struck. Arjuna's grief changes shape at once, because some sorrows become heavier the moment they acquire a true name. Dhritarashtra hears all this too. Of course he does. Another secret, another silence, another hidden fire that burned beneath the floorboards for years while everyone walked around above it, discussing honor. The old king says nothing. What is left to say? The kingdom returns to Hastinapura, but it does not return as it left. The streets are fuller of white garments now. The market sounds are thinner. Fewer young men arguing over horses. More old women buying oil for lamps. The blacksmiths still hammer, but not for battle gear. Funeral vessels, door fittings, farm tools. Life, stubborn and practical, resumes because someone always has to cook the rice and sweep the threshold. Yudhishthira is crowned. It is done properly. Conches sound, priests chant, sacred fires are lit, but even the music seems careful, as if afraid of being heard too far into mourning. The smell of clarified butter rises from the altar flames. Garlands of marigold and jasmine hang fresh and bright. Gold vessels gleam. The white umbrella of kingship is raised over Yudhishthira's head, and Dhritarashtra sits nearby, honored, respected, still called elder, still given the place due to the old patriarch of the Kuru house. That is the beginning of the strangest part. Not war, not the embrace, the years after, because now Dhritarashtra must live in the palace of the men his choices tried to ruin. He must eat at their tables, hear their servants, accept their courtesies, be led through halls where every kindness reminds him that his sons lost and these sons remained. Yudhishthira makes the arrangement generous beyond reason. He gives Dhritarashtra every comfort: proper attendance, separate chambers, food prepared with care, respect in public and private. He bows each day, asks after his health, consults him in matters of custom, makes sure Gandhari and Kunti are tended with all honor. You can feel the softness of the rugs laid in their quarters. Hear the clink of bronze water pots set down before sunrise. Smell aloe-wood smoke curling from censers in the evening. Silk rustles. Courtyard pigeons mutter from the eaves. The old routine of royalty is rebuilt around loss, as if etiquette might stitch a kingdom back together. But courtesy cannot sweeten everything. Bhima lives in this palace too. Bhima, who has never met a thought he did not think should be spoken aloud. For a while, he keeps still, more or less, as still as a thundercloud can keep still. Then one day, perhaps after court, perhaps after hearing one too many old men praise the blind king's patience, Bhima lets something slip where Dhritarashtra can hear. It is not shouted. That would be almost easier. It is said in that rough, carrying voice of his, meant for companions, but placed where it will travel. A comment about the food in the royal kitchens, about who is being fed, about how strange it is that the old king, who once let wolves loose in the house, now eats from the granary saved by the men he wanted, starved, burned, or exiled. A cruel line, a true line, the most troublesome kind. Dhritarashtra hears it all. Blind men do. Always. When sight is gone, the world arrives by other roads. Sound does not stop politely at doorways. A change in breath can tell you more than a face. The old king hears the scrape of Bhima's arm ring against the pillar as he folds his arms. He hears the servants freeze, pretending not to exist. He hears Yudhishthira's quick intake of dismay. He hears the silence afterward, embarrassed and dense as curd. And he says nothing. That is part of the punishment. No fury, no command, no exile for Bhima, only the swallowing of it. Again and again, through the years, little things like this find him. Not every day, not always by Bhima, but Bhima most of all, because Bhima is made for direct impact. He remembers the poison, the lakh house, the dice hall, Draupadi dragged by the hair, the exile, Abhimanyu hemmed in and brought down. He carries memory like a mace, simple, heavy, not decorative. Still, he obeys Yudhishthira. He does not strike the old man. He does not disgrace Gandhari. He merely leaves words lying around the palace, like thorn branches. And Dhritarashtra, walking by touch, finds them with bare feet. There are meals when everyone is perfectly courteous. Those are almost the hardest. Picture it. The evening lamps are lit. Their scent is sesame oil and warm cotton wick. Brass plates shine in rows. Steamed rice sends up soft clouds. Lentils scented with cumin. Greens cooked down with ginger. Flatbread brushed with ghee. The rain drums softly in the courtyard during monsoon season, and the smell of wet earth rises cool and forgiving from the garden paths. Yudhishthira invites Dhritarashtra to dine first. Bhima serves him respectfully if required. Arjuna asks after his comfort. Nakula and Sahadeva speak gently to Gandhari. Kunti sits near enough that the old world and the new world nearly touch elbows over the same meal. Everything is correct, everything is civilized, and under it all is Kurukshetra. That field sits at every table. 15 years pass this way. Not quickly. Years in stories can leap like deer. These do not. These walk with a staff. One festival at a time. One rainy season. One dry season. One winter dawn with cold stone underfoot and smoke hanging low from village fires. One spring, with mango blossoms sweet in the courtyards, and children born after the war beginning to run through halls that used to belong to the dead. The kingdom heals in the practical manner of kingdoms. Taxes collected, fields sown, cattle counted, roads repaired, marriages arranged, babies named after grandfathers they will never meet. Dhritarashtra remains. An old banyan trunk left standing in a courtyard after the storm has taken all its branches. Vidura comes and goes like a patient conscience. He has always been quiet, but the years have thinned him into something even more spare. His garments are simple. His voice never hurries. He speaks to Dhritarashtra in private, often in the cool hour before dawn when the palace is washed and silent and only the first birds are trying their notes. He tells the old king what no one else can tell him without reopening old battle lines. That age has come. That dependence is bitter because it strips away illusions one meal at a time. That grief cannot be fed forever on resentment. That a man may lose a kingdom and still keep clinging to the doorway as if the wood itself owes him comfort. Dhritarashtra listens. Sometimes he grows angry. Sometimes he sinks into memory and says the old things, my sons, my house, my line, my sorrow, as if repetition might turn possession into healing. Vidura does not argue much. He has spent a lifetime advising men who preferred disaster with ceremony to wisdom in plain cloth. He knows better than to waste too many words. Gandhari remains as she always was after the war. Contained fire. Her blindfold never leaves her. Her discipline is terrible to witness because it is so complete. She eats little, speaks little, performs her duties exactly. When she walks, the sound is measured. One step, then the staff or guiding hand, then another. No wasted movement, no self-pity. The palace bends around her silence. You can feel it when she enters a room. Even Bhima, for all his rumbling honesty, does not rumble as much. Kunti lives near them too. That, perhaps, is one of the oddest mercies of these years, the mother of the victors tending the parents of the defeated. Her own grief folded inward, Karna gone, her grandsons gone, the line surviving, yes, but cut and thinned and haunted. She serves Gandhari, speaks softly to Dhritarashtra, shares the long dim afternoons where old people sit together and let memory arrive in pieces. Sometimes Sanjaya is there, still faithful, still carrying reports, though now they concern harvests, pilgrimages, and court matters instead of who has fallen before noon. Yet, even when he speaks of ordinary things, you sense that war has changed the weight of his voice forever. Once a man has described Bhishma falling and Drona's end and Karna in the dust. Discussing grain stores must feel almost indecently normal. The seasons keep turning. In summer, the palace stones store heat well after sunset. Fans of woven palm move slowly in the hands of servants. The scent of vetiver water is sprinkled on curtains. Outside, the city dozes in waves of afternoon hush, broken by the occasional shout of a fruit seller who refuses to be defeated by weather. During monsoon, the thunder rolls over Hastinapura, and the old king listens to it from under carved eaves. Rainwater splashes from gargoyled spouts into overflowing basins. Frogs become briefly overconfident. The air smells of wet clay, neem leaves, and relief. In winter, the mornings bite. Breath fogs faintly in the open halls. Wool shawls are brought out. Fires burn low in braziers, and the smoke smells sweet with resin. And always the same arrangement remains. The old king fed by the house of the men who brought down his sons. At first, that seems impossible. Then, after enough years, it becomes routine. Routine can be crueler than calamity. Calamity strikes once. Routine sits beside you at breakfast. At last, the strain begins to show, not in scenes, but in his body. Dhritarashtra eats less, sleeps less. The cushions are still soft, the food still rich, the attendants still careful. But inwardly he has begun to turn away, shame from the iron statue, grief from the war, daily dependence, Bhima's barbed truths, Yudhishthira's unbearable goodness, Vidura's patient reminders, Gandhari's austere example, all of it works on him slowly, like river water shaping stone. One evening Bhima speaks sharply again, and this time the words travel farther than he meant. Something about how the old king consumes royal food after consuming royal sons. Crude, effective. Dhritarashtra does not answer in the moment, but later, in private, he tells Gandhari he can no longer bear the life of a pensioned ruin in a palace built on his own failures. He speaks of the forest, of leaving, of ending this long dependence before his bones soften completely in comfort he has not earned. Gandhari agrees at once. Of course she does. She has likely been ready for years. Vidura approves. He has likely been waiting. Yudhishthira, when he hears of it, will be shattered. But that comes next. For now, stay here in the evening before the decision becomes public. The palace is quiet. Somewhere, a veena sounds faintly from a distant chamber. A few notes only, then stops. The smell of night-blooming jasmine drifts in from the garden. Dhritarashtra sits with Gandhari beside him, both old now beyond all disguises. No throne, no assembly, no sons left to indulge, no war left to avoid. Just age, just memory, just the first honest desire of his life that asks nothing from a kingdom, to leave it. And in that small, late desire, something almost gentle enters the room. Not joy, not peace yet, but the first loosening. The hand unclenching at last. One morning, the air in the palace feels different, not cooler. Hastinapura is never generous for long, but still. Something has shifted. The servants move more softly. The corridors carry less chatter. Even the pigeons on the courtyard ledges seem to coo under their breath, as if they too have received some private instruction. Dhritarashtra sends for Yudhishthira. When the king arrives, you can almost hear the old floor remember him. Sandaled steps across polished stone, the rustle of cotton, the faint clink of a bracelet where a sleeve slips back. Yudhishthira kneels, as he always does. Dhritarashtra tells him he is leaving. Not tomorrow. In the vague way old men threaten change, and then ask for another cushion. Not after the rains, not after one more festival, one more rite, one more excuse. Now, he says he has eaten enough of another man's food, sat long enough in another man's hall, grieved long enough among carved pillars and gold lamps that cannot warm anything worth warming. He is going to the forest. He will live there as an old man should, on roots and air and prayer, not palace dishes and memory. Yudhishthira breaks. It is immediate. The grief comes out of him, like water from a jar tipped too fast. He begs. He offers the kingdom again, absurdly, as if crowns are medicine. He says the old king may command him, rebuke him, even abandon the throne room to him entirely, if that would ease the pain. Anything but this final departure. But Dhritarashtra is done being persuaded. For once in his life, truly done. Gandhari speaks too, calm and hard as river stone. She will go with her husband. That part is no surprise. She has followed his darkness for a lifetime. She is not about to leave him for the last stretch. Then Kunti steps forward, and the room changes all over again. She says she will go too. There is a sound then, not loud, but sharp, the little sound people make when the heart is struck before the mind catches up. Her sons stare at her. You can feel it with them, the sudden cold in a warm room, the smell of sandalwood smoke turning strange in your nose. These brothers have lost kingdoms, won wars, buried children. But this lands with a special cruelty. Their mother is leaving them. Kunti does not tremble. She has carried too much for trembling. She says she has lived long enough in palaces, long enough with secrets, long enough with the comfort earned by other people's suffering. She will go into the forest with the old king and queen. She will spend the rest of her life in penance and prayer. No one can move her. Not Bhima, with all his great storm heart. Not Arjuna, who has faced gods and still looks suddenly like a boy. Not the twins, whose grief always comes more quietly, which somehow makes it worse. And not Yudhishthira, who understands before the others do, that this decision has already hardened, like clay baked in sun. Like fate after the last warning. You stand in that chamber with them for a moment and hear only breath. Then the preparations begin, slowly. Ritual always arrives with baskets. Gifts are gathered for brahmanas. Cows are brought, cloth is folded, gold is measured out. Priests recite. Fires are lit. Farewells collect themselves around the old royal pair like drifting leaves around a stepwell. Dhritarashtra performs rites for the dead, for sons, for grandsons, for the whole broken house. It is a strange sight, even if he cannot see it. The old blind king, once surrounded by fanfare and council and armed guards, now reduced to what every man becomes in the end, an old body before a sacred fire, feeding clarified butter to flames and remembering names. The smell of ghee thickens the air. Smoke rises blue and slow. Somewhere nearby, someone sobs into the edge of a shawl. Then, at last, the day comes. They leave by the city gate at dawn. No chariot with bright banners, no drums, no royal parasol. That chapter is over. Dhritarashtra walks with a staff. Gandhari walks beside him. Kunti follows, dressed simply, her hair bound, her ornaments left behind. Sanjaya goes too for a time, faithful as ever. A few attendants trail them with the barest necessities. Nothing more. The citizens line the road. Of course they do. Cities always gather when power leaves, even power worn thin and sorrowful. Old men lean on sticks. Women lift children to see. Merchants stand in their shop fronts with flour still on their hands. Soldiers stare straight ahead and blink too much. You are there in the crowd as they pass. Dust rises around their feet. The smell is road dust, warm stone, ox dung from the outer streets, and morning flowers crushed under too many sandals. Temple bells ring somewhere behind the houses. Farther off, beyond the gate, a herd of goats creates the sort of chaos only goats can manage. Even great renunciation must wait, while one small goat decides the road belongs to him. No one laughs, but someone almost does, then swallows it. Yudhishthira walks with them for a long way. So do his brothers. So do the women of the house. They cannot seem to stop. Every few steps, there is another plea, another folded hand, another tearful bow. Dhritarashtra blesses them. Gandhari blesses them. Kunti does not turn back much. That is the hardest part. If she looked too often, she might stay. At last, the old king tells them to return. He says enough. No more. Go back to the city. Rule it. Bear what remains. And so, the sons stop on the road while the parents keep walking. This is the moment. You can feel it. The city sounds fade behind them, little by little. First the wheels, then the market shouts, then the smith's hammer, then the barking dogs behind courtyard walls. Even the temple bells become thin, then thinner, then gone. Ahead, there is only open road, then scrubland, then trees. The forest receives them without ceremony. That is one of the forest's better qualities. It does not bow. There are hermit paths under sal and banyan trees, leaf-strewn and narrow. There are roots that catch old feet, thorn bushes that do not care who used to sit on a throne, monkeys that watch from branches like rude little ministers who have resigned from all earthly government. They reach the hermitage near the Ganga, not a palace, not even close. A few huts of leaves and branches, earthen altars, water pots, firewood stacked under rough shelter, mats woven from grass, the ground uneven, the nights cool, the mornings full of birds that begin before any reasonable person would choose to be conscious. Dhritarashtra settles there. And so does something in him. The first days are hard, very hard. An old body does not become an ascetic merely because the mind has had a dramatic thought. Knees ache, the spine protests, hunger nags. Sleep on the ground is not charming after the age of 80. Anyone who tells you roots and fruits are enough has either never eaten them for months or has very forgiving teeth. Still, they do it. Dhritarashtra eats little. Gandhari eats less. Kunti serves them both and takes almost nothing for herself. They bathe in the river. They offer water to the dead. They sit facing the dawn. They recite prayers. They wear bark cloth and rough fabric that scratches the skin and hangs without vanity. The smell around them becomes wood smoke, wet earth, river mud, crushed leaves, and the faint sweetness of wild jasmine at night. You sit there with them in the evening hush and hear the Ganga moving nearby. Not loudly, steadily, a long silver thought in the dark. For the first time in his life, Dhritarashtra has no court to manage, no petitions, no nephew against son, no son against dharma, no ministers waiting for his weakness like crows waiting on a field. He rises, washes, prays, eats, remembers, breathes. That is all. And strangely, it is enough. Days become weeks. Weeks become seasons. The monsoon comes and drums on leaf roofs till the whole world sounds like fingers on 1,000 small drums. The ground turns soft. Frogs become far too pleased with themselves. Moisture gets into everything. Cloth, prayer beads, old bones, thoughts. Then clear weather returns. Sun through the trees, dusty gold afternoons, cool mornings with mist over the river. In the hot months, cicadas scream as if they are personally responsible for the heat. The old king grows thinner, also quieter, not defeated now, stripped, which is different. Sometimes the Pandavas visit. They come with priests, queens, attendants, offerings, and the awkward tenderness of children trying to care for those who no longer belong to them in the old way. Yudhishthira bows again and again. Bhima tries to keep his mouth shut and mostly succeeds, which, in Bhima's case, counts as advanced spiritual practice. Arjuna stands near Kunti for long stretches without speaking. The twins bring what is needed before anyone asks. Then they leave, and the forest closes behind them again. One day, another old companion comes to its end. Vidura. He has been living nearby in fierce austerity, reduced almost to spirit already, his body lean as a branch in late summer. When Yudhishthira sees him, the sight is startling. The wise counselor who once moved through palaces like a quiet blade now seems made of bark, breath, and almost nothing else. Their meeting is brief and sacred. Vidura gives what remains of his life into Yudhishthira and slips away from this world like a lamp going out just before dawn. The forest absorbs even that. No speeches, just wind and leaves. Time passes. Then comes the night by the river. Vyasa arrives. He comes the way great sages do in this epic, suddenly enough that everyone behaves as if this is perfectly normal, though it never really is. His matted hair, his stillness, his presence that seems to bend the space around him. The air itself feels attentive when he stands near. He sees their grief still living under the ash of years. He knows what remains unfinished. So he offers them a gift. At the Ganga, he says, the dead may be seen. That night, they go to the riverbank. You go with them. The sky is dark velvet, heavy with stars. The moon lays a pale path across the current. Lamps flicker on the bank, their flames trembling in the night breeze. The smell is river water, cool mud, lamp oil, damp reeds, and the faint perfume of night flowers opening in the dark. The gathered people stand silent. Widows, mothers, brothers, fathers. The old grief of Kurukshetra gathered in one place beneath the stars. Vyasa enters the waters and calls. The river answers. At first it is only movement, ripples where no wind touches, a shining in the dark current, then shapes, then forms rising from the Ganga as if the water itself has remembered every name. Warriors emerge, not broken, not stained, radiant. Bhishma comes, noble and serene, no arrows holding him now. Drona comes with the calm face he should have worn in old age. Karna rises bright as the sun after rain. Abhimanyu appears young forever, terrible and beautiful in that way the very young become, when time can no longer touch them. Draupadi's sons are there. The sons of Dhritarashtra are there. Duryodhana too, proud and splendid, with no bitterness left in him. And then the impossible kindness. Dhritarashtra sees, for the first time, not through report, not through memory built from sound, not through the careful mercies of other people's descriptions, with his own eyes. Imagine it. After a life in darkness, the world arrives all at once. Light on water, moon on armor, faces, actual faces, the line of a cheek, the arch of a brow, the color of skin, cloth, jewels, river, sky. Sons he had known only by touch and voice now stand before him in visible form. 100 boys grown into men and beyond men, all there. He sees Duryodhana, his firstborn, not groaning on a battlefield by a lake, not as rumor, not as fear, not as loss, at peace. He sees Dushasana. He sees the others, one after another, a flood no less overwhelming than the river itself. And he sees more, Bhishma, whom he loved and resented and leaned upon. Drona, stern no longer. The young ones too, Abhimanyu, the sons of Draupadi, those who should have lived longer and laughed more and grown old enough to complain about their joints and their grandchildren. They are all there. The night becomes a meeting place between worlds. Mothers go to sons, wives to husbands, fathers to children. No one accuses, no one argues. The war has loosened its grip at last. Gandhari sees 100 sons. Kunti sees Karna. That meeting alone could split a heart. She looks at the son she set afloat long ago, and he stands before her, freed of all earthly injury. The old ache between them washed clean by a river deeper than the Ganga. You stand on the bank and hear low voices everywhere. Not debate, not courtroom speeches, not war cries, only reunion, only recognition. The river glows, lamps drift. The night holds all of it gently. For once, the Kuru house is together without poison in the room. No dice, no whispering uncle, no rigid old vows, no fathers choosing wrong sons, no sons begging wrong fathers. Just one long, impossible night of peace. Toward dawn, the light changes. Always it does. The eastern sky softens. Birdsong begins in the trees. Mist rises from the river like breath. One by one, the radiant forms return to the waters. They do not cling. That is part of the mercy. They came. They were seen. They were loved. Then they went. The Ganga closes over them. Morning remains. Dhritarashtra keeps his sight no longer than the gift allows. The world darkens again. But now his darkness is not the old darkness. Now it holds faces. That changes everything. After that night, the hermitage feels quieter still, not empty, completed. Dhritarashtra's penance deepens. He eats less, speaks less, breathes as if already practicing departure. Gandhari remains beside him, unwavering. Kunti continues her austere service, the queen of old sorrows, now content with clay pots and river water. Then, one hot season day, the fire comes. Forest fires do not ask permission. The air warns you first, drier than before. A restless smell, not cooking fire, not ritual fire, wildfire, sharp and hot and hungry. Birds burst from the trees in flocks. Deer run, monkeys scream overhead and vanish branch to branch like panic with tails. The wind shifts, smoke threads through the forest, then thickens. You taste it at the back of your throat. Bitter, dry, urgent, leaves hiss, small branches crack. Somewhere not far off, bamboo pops in the heat like knuckles. The attendants panic. Of course they do. Human beings are very committed to not being roasted if there is any possible alternative. Sanjaya, who has remained long in service, is there. He sees the flames racing through the dry wood and begs them to flee. But flee where? These are old bodies now, ascetic bodies, thin, worn, spent. The fire is moving too fast. Dhritarashtra understands before the others finish speaking. The end has come, and something remarkable happens. He does not struggle against it. No frantic orders, no royal panic, no cry to the heavens, demanding one more arrangement, one more exception, one more delay. He tells Sanjaya to go, live, carry the news. The old minister obeys with grief, tearing at him. But he obeys. He leaves them there and escapes through the forest, smoke trailing behind him. Dhritarashtra sits down, facing east. Gandhari sits beside him. Kunti sits with them. 3 old figures in bark and plain cloth, the firelight beginning to flicker over their still forms before the flames themselves arrive. The heat grows. You can feel it on your skin even from here. The air turns hard to breathe. Smoke folds through the trees. Ash drifts down like dark snow. The roar grows louder, not unlike a far river in flood, except this river eats forests. No one rises, no one runs. After a life of grasping, Dhritarashtra lets go, not of one thing, of everything, the throne, the sons, the justifications, the old inward speeches that had defended him for so many years, all of it. He sits straight, old king no longer, only an old man before the last fire, Gandhari beside him, faithful to the final breath as she had been to every shadow before it. Kunti with them, mother of victors, mother of griefs, going at last where no more secrets are required. The flames arrive, the forest takes them, and then there is only fire in the trees and wind pushing sparks upward into the darkening sky. Later, much later, when the news reaches Hastinapura, it comes not as rumor, but with sacred certainty. Narada arrives and tells Yudhishthira what became of them. The old king attained a bright world beyond sorrow. Gandhari went with him. Kunti too rose to her destined realm. Yudhishthira weeps, of course. How could he not? But there is comfort in the telling. Not easy comfort, not the sort that removes grief. Something quieter, finality. You can see him hearing it, head bowed, hands still, the smell of incense in the court, afternoon light across stone. Brothers silent beside him. No one needs to search. No one needs to wonder if the forest left them wandering or afraid. They met the end seated, facing the dawn. And when you return in your mind to that old blind king now, he is no longer on the throne in the empty palace. He is in the forest. The city is behind him. The river has already given back his sons for one night. The fire is near. He does not ask for another chance. At last, he accepts the one he has. The smoke rises through sal branches into the evening sky. The Ganga keeps moving in the dark. And somewhere beyond sight, where the lost are no longer lost, the house of Kuru is quiet. So after all of that, after the palace and the dice and the war and the fire, what were the ancient storytellers trying to tell us? They gave you a blind king for a reason, not so you would sit there thinking only about eyes, not about darkness as a physical condition, about the other kind, about the blindness that begins in the heart long before it reaches the face. Dhritarashtra is born without sight. That is the wound life hands him. He does not choose it. He grows up learning halls by echo, learning people by breath and footstep, learning power by the tremor in a servant's voice. You can feel the stone floors under his feet, cool at dawn, warming by noon. You can hear the palace around him deciding, very early, what he can never be. That part is tragedy, but it is only the beginning, because the deeper blindness comes later, and that one he does choose. That is the hard truth resting at the center of his life. The world was unfair to him, yes. It denied him, yes. It mocked him before he had done anything wrong, yes. And still, what ruined him was not what life took from him. It was what he refused to face once power finally reached his hands. That is why his story stays with you. Dharma runs through his whole life like a road he can always see beneath his feet and still somehow avoids. Dharma is duty, yes, but not in some stiff, joyless way. It is the right shape of action, the honest thing required by your place in the world. Dhritarashtra almost always knows it. That matters. He is not a fool stumbling in innocence. He knows Duryodhana is dangerous. He knows the dice game is poison. He knows Draupadi is being wronged. He knows peace should be chosen over pride. He knows his love for his son is bending justice until it breaks. He knows and delays. That is his pattern. Not wild evil, not dramatic cruelty every hour of every day. Something softer, more familiar, more frightening, really. He postpones the right action until it is useless. That is the blindness the storytellers wanted you to recognize. The kind that says, not now. The kind that waits for a cleaner moment. The kind that hopes duty will somehow perform itself if you sit still long enough. It never does. The dice hall shows this more clearly than anything else. That is one of the great lessons of his life. Evil does not always arrive with fangs out and sword raised. Sometimes it sits very still in a royal hall while ivory dice click against polished wood. Sometimes it keeps asking what happened when everyone in the room already knows. Sometimes it waits for someone braver to speak first. You can almost smell that hall again, sandalwood and lamp smoke and the heat of too many bodies packed into one terrible afternoon. Dhritarashtra could have stopped it. Before the first throw, after the first loss, when Draupadi was summoned, when she questioned the court, when Bhima roared his vow, when the silence became unbearable, he had chance after chance after chance. And that is exactly the point. His failure was not one single monstrous act. It was 1,000 moments of hesitation piling up until they became catastrophe. That is how Adharma often enters a house, not by breaking down the door, by being permitted to stay one more night. And then there is Gandhari. Her blindfold is one of the saddest images in the whole epic. At first it feels noble, loving, fierce even, a wife refusing to enjoy what her husband cannot. There is devotion in it, real devotion. But devotion can lose its balance. Love can become attachment, and attachment can become its own kind of darkness. Gandhari shared his blindness out of loyalty, beautiful in one way. But the story asks you to feel the cost of that beauty. When love refuses to see clearly, it stops helping. It begins protecting what should be corrected. That is Maya at work. Maya is not just illusion like a magician's trick. It is the mist that makes you mistake attachment for wisdom. It is the fog that tells a parent that love means never resisting a child. It is the dream that says keeping peace in the moment is the same as preserving harmony. Dhritarashtra lives inside that mist for years. He tells himself he is being compassionate. He tells himself he is preserving family. He tells himself there will be time later to repair what is bending now. But later arrives wearing armor. That is karma. And karma in this story is not some neat reward and punishment machine. It is not a clock with a ledger. It is consequence ripening. It is one choice leaning into the next until a whole future begins to take shape. Dhritarashtra's karma is not merely that he loved his son too much. It is that he loved him without discipline. He tried to protect Duryodhana from pain, correction, and limits. In doing so, he could not protect him from himself. He could not save 100 sons because he would not guide even one. That is the arithmetic of the war, not punishment falling from the sky, consequences growing from seeds left untended in the house. By the time Kurukshetra arrives, the field is only harvesting what the palace planted. And then comes that iron statue. Such a powerful moment. All those years of formal grief, royal speech, controlled breathing, careful words. Then suddenly, the truth comes out through the body. Dhritarashtra reaches for Bhima and puts all his buried rage into one embrace. If Krishna had not intervened, that grief would have become one more irreversible act. That scene tells you something tender and severe at once. Feelings do not disappear because you hide them behind manners. Rage kept underground does not become wisdom. It becomes pressure. It waits. It hardens. The old king, who spent a lifetime avoiding open confrontation, nearly destroys a man the moment he is finally allowed to touch his sorrow. So even there, the story is still teaching. Face what lives in you before it takes form in your hands. And yet, the story does not leave him there. This matters too. The Mahabharata does not slam the door on Dhritarashtra and call him finished. It gives him the forest. It gives him old age. It gives him austerity, breath, bare earth, morning river water, cold on the skin. After all his failures, he's still allowed to begin again. You can feel why that matters. The palace is gone from him at last. No courtiers, no schemes, no son whispering in one ear, no throne to cling to, just an old man in bark cloth, smoke from the sacrificial fire in the air, leaves shifting overhead. And there, finally, he starts to release. This is one of the gentlest truths in the whole journey. It is never too late to turn toward clarity. Late, yes, painfully late, but not too late. That final vision by the Ganga says it beautifully. For one night, he sees, really sees, his sons, the fallen kings, the lost children, all of them beyond anger, beyond faction, beyond the noise of their old names. It is as if the universe gives him, at the very end, the thing he had been missing in more ways than one: sight, not to torment him, to complete him, and that is where it all begins to settle. Dhritarashtra's life is not mainly a tragedy of fate. Not finally. His first blindness is fate. His greater blindness is choice. The ancient storytellers preserved that distinction carefully. They wanted you to understand that suffering does not excuse surrendering your duty. Hurt can explain a person's weakness. It cannot make that weakness harmless. But they also wanted you to understand something merciful. A person can fail terribly and still move, at the end, toward truth. So when you close this long journey, what remains? That dharma, when put off too long, turns into sorrow. That karma grows quietly. That maya can look a lot like love if you are not careful. That silence in the face of wrong has its own weight. And that the most dangerous, blindness, is rarely the one in the eyes. It is the one that says, I do not want to know. Dhritarashtra spent a lifetime there. Then, at last, he turned. That is what stays with you when the story is done. Not despair, recognition. Because the blindness he suffered from most is not ancient at all. It lives wherever people confuse affection with permission, comfort with peace, delay with wisdom. It lives in every heart that knows the right thing and waits. And the answer that remains is simple, not easy, but simple. See clearly, say what is true. Do your duty before the moment passes. Love deeply, but do not let love become weakness. And when the time comes to release what you cannot keep, release it. That is how the blind king finally found peace. That is what he taught us to see. The fire has gone out, the forest is quiet, and the river keeps moving. Far away in Hastinapura, the palace still stands. Its courtyards are swept at dawn. Its lamps are filled with oil. Silk still rustles in long corridors where servants walk softly out of habit, as if old grief might be sleeping in the next room. And in the great hall, the throne waits, not for him now, not for the 100 voices that once crowded around it, just empty wood and carved arms, smooth where anxious hands once rested, an old seat under a wide roof, holding its silence like a vow. You can almost feel the cool stone under your feet there, the faint scent of sandalwood worked deep into pillars by years of smoke and prayer. Outside, somewhere beyond the walls, pigeons clatter up into the morning air. Life has that strange talent. It continues. The cooks still grind spices in the royal kitchens. The horses still stamp in their stalls. At sunrise, the conch still sounds from the temple, long and low, spilling across the city roofs like pale gold. Hastinapura does not vanish because one old king has gone into the forest and left the world behind. Cities are stubborn like that. They outlive pride. They outlive feasts, arguments, oaths, processions, victories, humiliations. They stand there through all of it, wearing dust and moonlight with the same patience, and the Ganges still flows past. She went by when Bhishma was young. She went by when children ran laughing through palace courts. She went by when dice struck polished wood in that terrible hall. She went by while Sanjaya spoke of war to a blind king in the dark. She went by when widows bent over the water with ashes in their shaking hands. And she goes by now, slow in some places, quick in others, silver under moonlight, brown and swollen in the monsoon, soft at the edges where reeds whisper and night insects sing. If you stand there long enough, you can hear the river speaking in its own language against the mud and stone, not hurrying, never arguing, just carrying everything onward. Somewhere upstream, perhaps, the bank still remembers that night when the dead rose, shining from the water. Bhishma, bright as moonlit steel. Drona, serene at last. Abhimanyu, young forever. Karna with no bitterness left in him. And the sons of Dhritarashtra, no longer torn by ambition, no longer burning with the old fever of the world. For one night only, one impossible kindness. And among them, the blind king opened his eyes. You can stay there a moment if you want. On that riverbank, the night warm and still, the smell of wet earth rising after dark, the faint sweetness of jasmine somewhere behind the gathered people, the hush that falls when grief, after years of clawing and crying and refusing, finally loosens its grip. No one needs to say very much in such a moment. The river says enough. The stars say enough. Even silence, then, feels full. And in the forest, where the fire passed, the ground is darker. Ash sank into the roots. Leaves returned in time. That is the gentlest thing about forests. They do not hurry, but they do forgive. Grass comes first, then little shoots, then the patient work of green life pushing upward through what burned. Maybe a deer steps lightly there at dawn, ears flicking, not knowing who sat facing east while smoke closed around them. Maybe wind moves through the branches overhead with the same dry whisper it made that day, only softer now. The place remains, changed, but remaining. You can smell that earth too if you imagine it closely enough. The dry wood, the faint memory of old smoke, the clean scent that comes after rain has touched a scarred place and made it cool again. That is where Dhritarashtra ended. Not in the hall, not on the throne, not surrounded by flatterers or frightened men, or the hard breathing of sons he could never refuse. Just under trees, with Gandhari beside him, with Kunti beside them. No court left to manage, no argument left to delay. Only the last warmth, the last breath, the last loosening. And then stillness. Above all of it, the same sky, the same stars that watched over the palace roofs, the same stars that looked down on chariots, on vows, on births announced by jackals, on mothers praying, on kings refusing, on brothers embracing too late, and then on peace. You are under that same sky now, in your own night, with your own thoughts gradually growing quieter. The air cools, the story settles, the throne can stay empty, the river can keep moving, the forest can hold its dark patch of earth without explanation. Nothing more is needed. Only this image, a palace in the distance, a river in the dark, a place in the forest where the fire has already done its work, and overhead, ash long gone, starlight remaining. If you listen carefully, you can almost hear the Ganges in the night, not calling anyone back, not asking for anything, just flowing. Past Hastinapura, past memory, past sorrow, past the last edge of names. Onward, quietly, endlessly.